The saga begins with a dark prophecy haunting our protagonist, Allan. In 10 years, the Federation, and the glorious kingdom of E will be reduced to ash by the hands of the five great sins. To prevent this apocalypse, I have stepped into a destiny I never asked for. But let's rewind. Allan never expected his fate to spiral into such a chaotic ordeal. One moment, he was a corporate zombie grinding through a grueling 78-hour work week. The next, he had transmigrated into the silk-wrapped life of a noble in a realm of fantasy. This entire experience was proving to be a confusing, yet hilariously luxurious twist of fate. However, reality checked him immediately when he realized he couldn't read a single word of the local script. He stared at the ancient text with all the intense wisdom of a legendary sage. While internally screaming about why he didn't receive the standard isekai protagonist perks, specifically, he wondered why the universe hadn't granted him the automatic language translation skill. It was a massive oversight by the gods of transmigration. His internal crisis was a source of silent amusement for his observing butler, who noted that the young master, in all his ignorant splendor, was holding the book upside down. Allan's initial assessment of his stats was bleak. He was illiterate and possessed absolutely zero special abilities, a truly unique and depressing combination for a fantasy world hero. But this gloomy introspection was instantly annihilated by a dramatic entry. An absolutely colossal spread of gourmet food arrived, announced as the young master's simple snack. The sight caused Allan's brain to short-circuit into a single thought: that looks good. A massive understatement for the pure, unadulterated joy of being fully fed for the first time in years. As he stuffed his face, the days of starving as a wage slave felt like a distant nightmare. The subsequent approach of a maid signaled the end of the meal. She asked if he was ready for his pre-bed bath, leading to the next surreal stage of his new life. He was ushered into a magnificent bathroom, where he was simultaneously massaged and scrubbed by two attendants like a king. The spectacle was so overwhelming, it rendered him completely and utterly speechless. His only coherent thought was a realization of his new status, living as an indolent, useless, and thoroughly pampered young master of a count's family. Was quite simply the best life imaginable, even if he had no idea where he was on the map. But then, a slightly unsettling detail was dropped by another servant. He mentioned that the other young masters would be returning on the morrow. This statement caused Allan to freeze with the genuine confusion of an amnesiac. "I have family," he asked, realizing he knew nothing about this body's history. The servant looked at him with an expression of profound, silent disbelief. "Masters Leo and Antonio," the servant replied, dropping the names like heavy stones. His tone dripped with mild reprimand, wondering why the young master didn't know his own blood. Those names struck Allan with a sense of ominous familiarity, a feeling that caused him to clutch his head in a gesture of theatrical frustration. The servants panicked, crying out, "Young master, are you all right?" But Allan decided that a momentary escape from reality was the only sensible reaction. He dipped his face into the water to scream, thinking, "Wait, am I in Psychedelia?" That name immediately triggered a cascade of memories. It was the unforgiving turn-based RPG he used to play obsessively in his former life. The very game where the kingdom faces a critical, inevitable bad ending. The ultimate endgame was the awakening of the five great sins' wrath: greed, sloth, pride, and obsession. The moment they arrived, it would signal the beginning of the end, the inexorable collapse of the kingdom, the slaughter of the nobility, and the destruction of the known world. But as he looked around his uncomfortably luxurious residence, the Palladio estate, a cold realization struck him. A feeling of deep-seated dread washed over him as he recalled that this house was the first major noble family to fall in the game's prologue. They were nothing more than a subquest tutorial before the main episode even began. This was a family of spectacular wretches. The eldest son, Leo, was the notorious tyrant of the red light districts, while the second son, Antonio, was an infamous drug lord. In a moment of crushing clarity, Allan, soaked, despairing, and utterly certain of his location, collapsed to his knees and screamed, "Are you kidding me right now?" It was a cry that signaled the profound unfairness of his reality. Because the Palladio family was, to his specific recollection, the very first casualty destined to be absolutely wrecked by the five great sins. And while that particular subquest had offered players a delightful amount of experience points, the reality was far crueler. He was now inhabiting the body of the throwaway villain in that doomed house, the third son, Allan Palladio. He slumped back into the bathtub, thoroughly drenched, and let his mind race. For a desperate moment, He pleaded with the universe, "Please, I want to go back to being a 78-hour-a-week wage slave." Because, he reasoned, that his current life of extreme luxury was entirely negated by one simple fact: the absolute certainty that he was going to die violently in 10 years. A fate, he loudly lamented, that was far worse than 6 months of unpaid wages. His subsequent tearful outburst about being possessed as a fantasy character with zero powers, while other protagonists received god-tier skills, was a momentary relapse into predictable self-pity. But suddenly, a flash of brilliance struck his mind like lightning. He scrambled up on his bed, a dripping wet figure of newly minted profit. He thought, wait, I know exactly what happens in 10 years. It's like being a prophet. This realization immediately led to a pragmatic and life-saving conclusion. Why not just eliminate the causes of this world's impending downfall before they happen? With this epiphany, the noble wage slave Allan Palladio decided on a new path. He would rehabilitate the 5 great sins for the sole and self-serving purpose of securing his peaceful, privileged life. A task he figured should be entirely manageable, considering they were currently just children with zero power. 2 months later, Allan's mercenary knight, Evan, arrived with a report. They had successfully raided the East Orphania Human Experimentation Lab and rescued the subjects. He had entrusted the management of the newly liberated orphanage to a girl named Yusha. This feat caused Allan to declare, with a practiced air of deep-seated confidence, that his eyes for talent were precise, and that Evan was truly a magnificent warrior. Evan, ever the literal-minded mercenary, was entirely unable to decipher Allan's stoic facial expression. He asked uncertainly if that was truly a compliment, to which Allan replied, "Yes, of course," before plastering on a forced, stiff smile. He added that he looked forward to their continued cooperation. Evan, bless his blunt soul, replied that he didn't think he would ever get used to that face, a statement that caused Allan to internally scream in frustration. It seemed his possession of this body had somehow stopped at the neck, leaving his facial muscles permanently locked in a villainous stiffness, masking his true emotions. A cruel irony, considering he used to be ridiculously easy to read. But now, he had to play the part of the mastermind, even if his face wouldn't cooperate. The stage was set, and the rehabilitation of the villains was about to begin. Evan, his wounds now fully healed, bowed his head to thank the young master for his high praise, a praise that Allan knew was entirely justified, for Evan was a diamond in the rough. In the chaotic world of Psychedelia, he was a rarity known for his steel-like honesty and unwavering loyalty in a sea of treachery, which was exactly why Allan had snatched him up the very moment his potential was discovered. Evan then sought to verify their true objective, asking if the entire mission had been orchestrated solely to save the girl named Yusha, to which Allan replied with a firm, simple nod, "Yes." Evan, speaking from years of blood-soaked experience as a mercenary, admitted that Yusha was no ordinary child. He recalled the terrifying, deep crimson aura she emitted when he first found her locked in that cell, a pressure so intense it could freeze a man's heart, making him wonder why she hadn't simply shattered her chains. Evan, still deeply concerned, voiced his confusion. Why hadn't Allan brought her back to the safety of the Palladio estate? He argued that leaving such a valuable asset at a rundown orphanage held no strategic benefit, a question Allan agreed with outwardly, but in the shadows of his mind, he knew the truth. Leaving her there instead of using her immediately was actually the cornerstone of his grand design centered on Yusha. Ludia, she was a non-human entity, destined to sign a contract with an otherworldly being and inherit forbidden power, a cataclysmic event that would crown her as the wrath of the 5 great sins, destined to slaughter hundreds of thousands of innocents. But that tragic fate, he calculated, could be rewritten if only she were allowed to grow up in peace, away from the darkness. Allan chose to mask his true intent, simply announcing to Evan that the time was not yet right. He delivered the words with such gravity that Evan stood frozen, repeating the phrase in disbelief. "It is not yet time." After a moment of heavy silence, Allan commanded Evan to ensure absolute secrecy regarding the operation and to flood the orphanage with generous sponsorship. Evan bowed instantly. "Yes." Allan then retrieved a sealed letter, handing it to his loyal subordinate with instructions to deliver it directly to Yusha. When Evan asked if the contents were critical, Allan shrugged it off, claiming it was merely to check on her well-being. He explained that he figured he should offer some reassurance. Considering the trauma she had endured, Evan accepted the letter of reassurance, promised it, would reach her hands, then mounted his steed and galloped away. Left alone, Allan mused that, while he doubted the letter would truly comfort her, the gamble was worth the effort. Allan then revealed the sinister truth behind the letter. It contained 3 specific trigger phrases, quotes he had heard countless times during the game's development implanted to reshape her consciousness. I heard from the Archbishop, "This is a spell that will let a divergent non-human like you live as one of us." It was a command designed to shackle her mind. The second phrase read, "O sin of wrath, calm thyself." In the final, most dramatically ominous incantation, agony of darkness, impassivity of the bride belonging to the fall. His mind flashed back to the original game scenario where a fully awakened, wrath and older, blood-soaked Yusha was decimating armies as she declared, "It is too late." He recalled how every attempt to soothe her rage in that timeline had failed, leaving death as the only option. But in this life, perhaps there was still a chance to rewrite the ending? Stretching his stiff limbs, Allan smirked. With the first landmine successfully disarmed, he decided to move on to the next target. He admitted that it felt ridiculous to try and tame a monster merely on the basis of some cheat codes, but he figured it might just work, considering these creatures worship some otherworldly god or cosmic entity. He concluded with a weary sigh that understanding the logic of fanatics was a fool's errand. Meanwhile, the letter reached Yusha, who read it in silence while Evan stood guard, paralyzed by the terrifying aura of mana radiating from her small frame. It was a sight that confirmed his darkest suspicions this was no ordinary child. Eyes glued to the page, Yusha asked if Master Allan truly sent this, unleashing a wave of pressure. She demanded with the overwhelming force of a cosmic wind, "Why does he refuse to have me by his side?" Evan recoiled, realizing that manifesting physical mana like this was a feat reserved for the Master Realm, but recalling Allan's grave expression and his cryptic words, "It is not time yet." The knight steeled himself and repeated to Yusha, "Yes, it is simply a matter of timing." He said the destined moment has not yet arrived. Hearing this, the killing intent vanished. Yusha hugged the letter to her chest and whispered, "I see." Interpreting it as a secret vow that only her master would understand, she finally let a smile grace her lips, a subtle yet terrifying gesture that confirmed her true identity as the Sin of Wrath, the daughter of a monster and the future Bloody Queen. Yusha, miles away, blissfully ignorant of the apocalyptic interpretation of his simple reassurance, Allan lay silently on his floor. He declared victory, celebrating that he had successfully extended his luxurious lifespan for another day, feeling as if the bright moon itself was cheering for his survival. He resolved to conquer the next great gate with equal brilliance before finally succumbing to sleep, wrapped in the pure and utterly ironic belief that he was saving the world, one deeply misunderstood mana trope at a time. The following morning greeted Allan with a rude physical intrusion, not from an enemy, but from his own library, as a cascade of books buried him during a frantic search. It was a hunt which he lamented was yielding absolutely nothing, as he couldn't find the necessary attire for the third boss. His internal complaints were swiftly interrupted by Evan, who burst into the room announcing he had successfully secured the second child. They had discussed a report that caused Allan to whirl around and ask with a sudden surge of sincere concern, "Did you treat the child kindly? Were you gentle?" To which the knight confirmed that, of course, he had treated them with care immediately after the rescue from the illegal slave market. However, before they could strategize further, the door was violently kicked open, revealing Tonio, the Count's second son. Seeing his brother, he announced his arrival with a sneer. Well, if it isn't Allan. He mocked the illiterate third son for holding a book, feigning surprise that Allan could even read or write. Antonio then expressed his twisted affection by grinding his elbow onto Allan's head in a show of aggressive dominance. But his playful expression instantly hardened as he demanded, "When your older brother speaks to you, you answer at once." Allan, meanwhile, was privately thinking that Tonio was a tremendous pain in the neck, wondering how the original Allan ever tolerated such foolishness. And though every instinct screamed at him to fight back, he surprised even himself by suddenly dropping to his knees before his older brother. Bowing his head in profound submission, he stated that since Tonio wished to use the study, he would respectfully leave. Evan, who had the unique vantage point of witnessing the raw disdain etched onto Allan's face, Tonio internally scoffed, convinced the young master finally understood his place in the pecking order. However, that fleeting illusion of dominance was shattered in an instant. Something tore through the air at breakneck speed, a cold dagger whistling past, missing Tonio's face by a mere centimeter. The attacker revealed himself. It was the eldest son, Leo, his entrance marked by a chilling declaration. He proclaimed that his younger siblings were being far too noisy. Tonio, barely recovering from the brush with death, immediately fired back at his brother. He sneered, suggesting Leo wash off that vulgar perfume stench before entering the study. But Leo's retort was swift, a succinct command for Tonio to get lost. It was delivered with the terrifying menace of a true mafia boss. Leo sealed the threat by pressing the cold steel of his blade against Tonio's throat, mocking him for being so weak against drugs. That was the signal. Allan didn't hesitate. He immediately began, stealthily rolling away, fleeing the room with Evan close on his heels. As he ran, Allan frantically revised his knowledge of the Palladio family. In the game, they were mere cannon fodder who vanished quickly. But this reality was different. Their true power was, he realized, far more terrifying than he had ever imagined. The two warring brothers, the king of prostitution and the king of narcotics, were locked in a vicious struggle for the family headship, controlling a massive underworld empire. These were monsters he must absolutely never provoke if he wanted any hope of living his peaceful, slacker life. No sooner had the pair escaped the room than a thunderous explosion rocked the library behind them. It was clear the brothers' war had begun in earnest. Allan's final thought as he scrambled toward his own quarters was that he would survive by remaining the weak, incompetent, and utterly legitimate third son. Finally reaching the safety of his room, he collapsed with relief. He was completely drained of energy, but Evan, who had shadowed him the entire way, casually dropped a bombshell. The second child they had rescued also seemed far from ordinary. Allan glanced at his knight, feigning a look of confused admiration. Internally, Evan was racking his brain. He couldn't fathom how a person like Allan, who seemed helpless, had managed to locate a secret bioweapon lab and an illegal slave market in a foreign land to rescue these children. And for what reason? Ignoring the silent interrogation, Allan simply sprawled out on the sofa, declaring he was too exhausted to function. Evan, observing his master's eccentric behavior, noted how strange it was for him to immediately send the rescued child straight to an orphanage. It was a sentiment Allan silently agreed with. But he knew the truth, that child wasn't just special, he was a world-ending calamity far beyond anyone's comprehension. The boy in question was Duce, the future second boss of Psychedelia. Allan had pulled him from the hell of an illegal slave market in the central Ghanaian kingdom. In the original storyline, that abused and imprisoned boy was destined to awaken as the sin of Sloth, one of the legendary 5 great sins. A terrifying vision flashed in Allan's mind, the sin of Sloth unleashing a torrent of furious purple mana, resulting in the gruesome dismemberment of countless souls. It highlighted the kingdom's cruelty in a way that had truly haunted the nightmares of the dark fantasy games players. A duality made worse by the fact that despite his lazy title, the Sin of Sloth was a terrifyingly diligent monster. He had repaid every single wrong done to him tenfold, a horrific retribution that made Allan, even after merely describing the facts to Evan, tremble, causing the cup in his hand to shake uncontrollably. He took a steadying sip before explaining his strategic reasoning for exiling Deuce to the orphanage. The time is not yet ripe. Evan then queried if the missive Allan had dispatched to Miss Yusa concerned this second child. Allan smirked, recalling the letter's contents trivial complaints about his own life designed to disarm her. "How do you do? I am well. My second brother mistook me for a chair again today." Amusing, is it not? He implied that while he penned daily grievances to forge a bond, he had also slipped in the truth he was sending a sickly child and begged her to care for them. Word of Deuce's arrival soon rippled through the orphanage. As the boy stood isolated, Yusa approached. Observing his tattered rags and fresh wounds, she immediately declared that she saw the scars of the black goat, a chaotic entity that Allan, in his malice, had conveniently neglected to mention. Yusa, with a gaze of surprise and twisted reverence, told Deuce that he was broken, yet the great moon had chosen him in this fractured state. She congratulated him, commanding him to wield the gift he had received and awaken his true potential. She then unleashed a suffocating wave of mana, promising that if he pledged his absolute loyalty to Allan, his vengeance would be assured. As she reached out, Deuce responded, his body erupting with a terrifying aura of mana. However, Yusa's eyes locked onto Allan's letter, and the storm vanished. She calmed instantly, deciding her reply took precedence. A simple, yet powerful display of skewed priorities. The next day, Evan burst into Allan's room, shouting, "Where in the world is this third boss?" He announced a catastrophe. The intended successor was dead. Hearing this, Allan froze, a stunned "what?" escaping his lips. Realizing that the sin of Sloth had met an accidental end too early, they attended the funeral, a chaotic, unholy circus where a guest whined, "Count, I am famished." And another groaned, "When will this farce end?" It confirmed Allan's suspicion the Palladio family was truly insane, parading drugs and courtesans at their own son's wake. A grotesque mess that could only exist in a dark fantasy game. Allan, gazing at the corpse, mused that the circumstances of this death were suspicious. He noted that Leo, who had supported the deceased for so long merely to usurp him, now looked as if he had won the jackpot. A devilish smile played on his lips, suggesting the killer was a pawn of Leo, or perhaps Leo himself. Allan, looking down at Tonio's cold body, resolved that all he had to do now was dismantle the problem of the five great families. 1 year later, with the succession settled, Leo divorced, and the drug trade silenced, the Palladio family entered an era of relative peace. Allan and Evan convened once more. Allan explained that over the year, he and Yusa had become pen pals, a tactic he believed and was forging a familiarity that would prove vital in the future. He read an excerpt from Yusa's latest report on the orphan's progress. Yuna has mastered hide and seek. Hayden excels at ball games, and Deuce frequently performs puppet shows. They are blossoming without issue. It was a passage that caused Allan to remark that everything was proceeding to perfection. Yusha had also reported a massive surge in sponsorship funding, a flood of wealth that Allan noted was suspicious for a mere orphanage, making him wonder if his grand design was truly working. Just then, a servant burst into the room with urgent news. The scouts Allan had deployed had finally unearthed a vital clue regarding the third boss. Allan casually took a bite of his snack, a wave of relief washing over him. He realized the clue pointed to the ancient relic linked to the third boss, confirming that his plans were proceeding in perfect, peaceful harmony. However, the atmosphere shattered instantly. The scene shifted to a shadow drug den in the market, where a brutal execution was taking place before terrified witnesses. One thug smirked, boasting of the eldest son, Leo, and his boundless generosity with payments. His partner laughed, bragging that their syndicate had always paid well. He claimed their organization had swelled to 100 strong and would soon dominate the entire underworld, but their laughter died in their throats. Horror consumed them as they faced two figures, and the men began screaming. "My hand, it is moving on its own. Help me," they cried, as invisible strings forced them to mercilessly slaughter their own allies in a gruesome display. A figure cloaked in darkness emerged, remarking with a chilling smile. She stated she had thoroughly enjoyed the puppet show, noting how the corrupt organization had grown fat on greed. As the strings of fate tightened, Yusha asked why her companion felt pity for such victims. The cloaked figure, Deuce, scoffed at the question. He replied that he had no pity for bastards who ground up humans to manufacture their twisted wares. Yet, he questioned if this slaughter truly served their path of vengeance. Yusha unleashed her terrifying aura, her eyes glowing with obsession. She declared that this carnage was the bedrock for the kingdom where Allan would return, and they could not allow his throne to be built on anything shabby. Deuce nodded in grim understanding. He confirmed that the puppet shows mentioned in the letters were actually these gruesome purges. Their mission complete, the duo vanished into the night sky, flying away like phantoms. High above, Yusha whispered that everything was proceeding exactly according to Allan's will. Behind them, amidst the ruin, they left their calling card, the glowing sign of a blue moon. Allan's subsequent years were dedicated to a bizarre yet effective domestic fortification. Time flowed with unnatural speed, and 2 years vanished since his pact with Yusha began. It was a period of tranquility, so perfect, that Allan found the calm both gratifying and deeply suspicious. Meanwhile, his loyal retainer Evan, ever the diligent shadow, had been scouring the land for his master. The search ended abruptly in a burst of chaos. The knight crashed into the backyard and, exhausted beyond measure, collapsed onto the earth. Gasping for air, he declared his return, confirming that he had finally found Allan. Allan, startled by the dramatic entrance, looked down at his fallen subordinate. Still kissing the dirt, the knight delivered the critical intelligence. The fifth and final child, the last piece of the apocalyptic set, had been safely secured at the orphanage. A report that filled Allan with a quiet, amused satisfaction. He internally tallied his victory. Since his possession of this body, he had successfully rescued all three of the remaining future sins who would have destroyed the world. With a smile, he offered Evan a sweet pastry, inviting him to eat up as a reward. Evan, possessing the efficiency of a soldier and the loyalty of a puppy, crawled toward the treat with tears in his eyes and expressed his undying gratitude. Allan watched him, contemplating the arduous journey that still lay ahead. As the dust settled, Allan reflected on the hellish journey to locate the sin of greed. Securing this third target had been a nightmare, a feat only possible through the desperate application of his esoteric game knowledge, and by driving Evan to the absolute brink of physical collapse. Then, in a moment of sheer, almost comedic theatricality, Allan tossed 4 food rations high into the air. Like a trained beast, Evan leaped. He snatched the food mid-flight with terrifying grace, devouring it instantly. Witnessing this pathetic display, Allan finally showed mercy to his exhausted knight, having scourged the entire continent without sleep. The time for rest had finally come. Evan seized this lifeline, his voice trembling as he asked if the orphanage missions were truly finished. When Allan confirmed the crusade was definitively over, the knight practically melted into the earth, his soul leaving his body in sheer relief. However, the knight then looked up with the confused sincerity of a man who dealt only in hard facts. "Master, are you actually happy about this victory?" To him, Allan's face remained as cold as stone. Allan, attempting to force his facial muscles into submission, insisted he was smiling. He managed to produce a microscopic, barely perceptible twitch of his lips. It was a sight that merely caused Evan to shrug helplessly, suggesting Allan simply verbalize his joy instead. Allan finally leaned back, savoring the moment. The plan was proceeding far better than he had dared to dream. He recalled the lore of Psychedelia. The final bosses had all corrupted into the 5 great sins because of their uniquely tragic and horrific past. And though he had arrived in this timeline before their full awakening, the odds of completely preempting those life-altering traumas had been statistically critical. He had been genuinely terrified that he would find them only after their souls were already shattered beyond repair. "Status report," Allan commanded. Evan instantly snapped to soldier mode, handing over Yosha's latest missive. It reported that the institution was thriving. The children, who once resembled broken dolls, were finally learning to shine. Allan expressed his genuine surprise. A wave of relief washed over him. He wouldn't even need to hire a specialized child care teacher. He mentally applauded Yosha for doing such an unexpectedly magnificent job. Her success was likely tied to her original character settings, which featured a hidden affinity for orphanages. Despite her core personality suggesting she would despise such interference, in her own twisted way, Allan conceded aloud, "She really is a good kid." Evan, with the pragmatic curiosity of a veteran scout, asked if the letter contained critical intelligence. Allan read the summary aloud, noting that everyone was healthy. A few of the potential calamities were growing exceptionally well at the center. He no longer needed to worry about Deuce, nor should he fret over the nature of the newest edition. They were simply having fun. Allan stated that it simply felt good. To know that all the children at the orphanage were growing up properly warmed his heart. To think all 5 great sins were developing normally. It confirmed his theory that the environment was the absolute deciding factor. Evan then stepped forward, closing the physical distance between them. He asked the inevitable question. "So, Master, when do you plan to actually go see your children?" Allan deflected the request yet again, relying on his perpetual excuse that the fated time had not yet arrived. Suddenly flustered, he stammered, that is..." His mind screamed in panic, rejecting any intention of ever meeting them face to face, even as he rationally argued with himself. While maintaining friendly relations was beneficial, the original game lore was clear. Their descent into becoming the 7 deadly sins was so gruesome that their personalities were twisted nightmares from childhood, terrifying even in flashbacks. He prayed his early intervention had softened their darkness, but the mere thought of them remained bone-chilling. Unable to maintain eye contact, he turned, his face away, offering a vague and safely distant timeline to stall for survival. "The time? Perhaps in 5 years," he lied. To which the ever-loyal Evan simply bowed and replied, "I see." Allan concluded that his only mission in this wretched dark fantasy world was to amass enough personal power to survive the inevitable catastrophe caused by his own meddling. With renewed determination, he began diligently circulating his mana, feeling a rare sense of arrogance. Magic required innate talent, and by some stroke of luck, this possessed vessel was overflowing with genius potential. Evan, watching his master cultivate energy, casually remarked, "By the way, young master, have you heard of the Blue Moon?" Allan paused, his concentration breaking. Blue. What, that is a name I have never heard before? Evan explained that it was a recently infamous organization, a shadow group specializing in hunting down criminal syndicates. Allan mused that they sounded like vigilantes, a cleaning crew taking out the trash. They were clearly an extra variable, a faction not part of the original story he knew, which meant they were likely insignificant and would vanish soon enough. However, Evan then delivered a piece of information that froze Allan's blood. "But those bastards also assassinate nobles," he added, warning that Allan should be wary of their brutal methods. Instantly terrified, Allan ceased his magic practice, and with a voice trembling in fear, he ordered Evan to sleep in the adjoining room as a human shield. The scene shifted abruptly to the orphanage, where Yusa stood before the gathered children, her eyes gleaming. "Now then, shall we hear the Blue Moon's activity report for this week?" She commanded Salvang, the future sin of pride, to report. The girl giggled, happily sharing that she had ripped the heads off numerous slave traders. She cheerfully added that she had been spotted, so she decided to test their wits in a twisted game. She offered them life if they could guess her eye color, but not a single soul survived. Ring, the future sin of greed, stepped up next, stating she had melted every corpse with acid, delivering the gruesome detail without a flicker of emotion. The third to report was Lytton, the future sin of Sloth, who confirmed the southern mission was complete. He yawned, noting that the illegal bioweapon lab and the annoying swarm of bastards from Avalon had been minced into unrecognizable meat. Yusa, listening to these tales of massacre and destruction, smiled beatifically. "Good. Everything is proceeding exactly according to his will," she declared, reminding the group that their existence was solely dedicated to the Great Moon, the central deity of the Blue Moon, their secret, nightmare-inducing organization. However, a complication arose. Yusa immediately challenged the notion, asking how anything could be a problem when their actions were perfectly aligned with their god's desires. Deuce stepped forward to explain the delicate situation, pointing out that the head of Avalon, the group they just slaughtered, was the eldest son of the very count's family where their lord currently resided. While securing his foothold in the southern territories, a chilling discovery shattered the calm. A secret directive had been issued. The target was Allan, and the hunter was his own brother, Leo. Yusha's reaction was instantaneous and terrifying. Her aura exploded outward like a dormant volcano, crushing the entire room under a suffocating weight as she roared, "What did you say?" But she quickly regained her icy composure, turning to the Seven Sins with a grim command. The moment the current count, who was already knocking on death's door, breathed his last, Leo was to be quietly eliminated. A dose of poison would seal his fate. With a satisfying crunch, she pulverized the paper containing the threat, reducing it to dust. 2 years passed in the blink of an eye, and Count Palladio finally met his end. The official records claimed a heart attack, but Allan, ever the analyst, knew the truth. The man had rotted away from his relentless drug abuse until his body simply gave up. However, the funeral was anything but peaceful. Evan leaned in close to Allan, his voice laced with anxiety. "My lord, have you heard? The Blue Moon organization? They launched another surprise raid last night." Nearby, a third knight trembled visibly, his whisper betraying pure dread. Were they completely wiped out this time as well? Hearing this, Allan realized the terror of the Blue Moon had sunk its claws far deeper into the public consciousness than he had calculated. The Count's funeral, devoid of a single genuine tear, concluded in suffocating silence. As the crowd dispersed, Allan and Evan made a calculated exit, slipping away from the other knights, a move that did not escape the eyes of the shadows. Evan turned to his master with a serious expression. "Young master, with Leo set to inherit the family headship next year, what is our move?" He glanced at the preparations. "And what of the luggage you ordered?" Allan's reply was calm, yet it carried the weight of a final verdict. "Pack your bags. Evan, We are leaving this place behind. Evan recoiled in shock. Are you planning to abandon the territory entirely? But Allan shook his head. He was merely relocating the pieces on the board. Do you mean Rodmill? Evan asked tentatively. Allan nodded, confirming their destination was indeed the humble village on the southern border. Without looking back, he stepped into the carriage, ready to leave the toxicity of the estate behind. 3 days later. Just as Allan was settling into a peaceful life cooking a humble omelet in the south, fate dragged him back by the collar. He found himself staring at Evan, who had returned with supplies and fresh juice, only to realize they were back at the Count's estate for yet another funeral. The impossible had happened. Leo was dead. Allan stood there, completely bewildered. Why was he back in this murderer's den? The timeline had shifted. Leo's death was premature. This wasn't supposed to happen yet. He stared down at Leo's cold body, observing the blade that had pierced his heart. Who on earth possessed the power to assassinate the drug king in his own home? Seeking answers, Allan turned to a nearby knight. What was the cause of death? But the man flinched violently. I apologize. Please forgive my eyes, he shrieked, while another guard frantically signaled his comrade to retreat, both trembling in absolute terror. Allan frowned, utterly confused by their bizarre behavior. What is wrong with everyone? Evan approached him slowly. When Allan asked for a status report, Evan spoke in a hesitant, fearful whisper that dropped a bombshell. My lord, about that matter. Was it you? Are you the mastermind who obliterated the Avalon Guild overnight? Allan froze. His own knight was implicating him in a terrifying act of mass slaughter. He looked around at the pale faces of the maids, servants, and knights, finally realizing that his carefully crafted reputation as trash had been replaced by something far more dangerous. The frail aura of a weakling had vanished, replaced by the suffocating presence of a shadow predator. Cornered in this dead end, he offered the only answer fate allowed. Yes, let us rewind the clock. Allan stood ready to depart for the borderlands. His loyal knight, Evan, stood by the carriage, worry etched on his face. He asked, My lord, is the city not safer? Allan merely nodded, his expression unreadable. His resolve was set in stone. He thought with stubborn pride, there is no turning back. Rodmill was not a choice. It was the endgame he had orchestrated. The epicenter. The very ground where he would salvage the 5 great sins from tragedy and prevent the world's absolute destruction. It sounded like the ravings of a madman, a self-imposed destiny fit for a delusional hero. Yet, he shouldered this burden with the chilling calm of a man who wrote the script. Rodmill was the key, an anomaly absent from the original story. The Palladio villa awaited him there. In his mind, it was the perfect sanctuary for a fallen noble to disappear. Take it easy, he told himself. Idleness, after all, was a noble's prerogative. But the mask of laziness slipped. His gaze hardened as he turned to Evan. Everything happens for a reason. Evan, however, was not easily fooled. He knew his master's slothful nature better than anyone. Do not mock me, my lord. You only speak of destiny when you wish to avoid actual work. Allan didn't even flinch. He practically beamed. Guilty as charged. A good life is an easy one. But as the wheels began to turn, a pair of eyes watched from the shadows. His brother, Leo. Malice festered in Leo's heart. He weighed the options. Murder or mercy. He came to a cold conclusion. Allan's existence was trivial. The plan was always poison, a fitting revenge for their father's death. But now Allan was exiling himself, slinking away to the border like a beaten dog. There was no need to dirty his hands today. Yet, paranoia is a difficult beast to silence. He signaled one of his men. Follow him. The subordinate, Allan, hesitated. My lord? He asked, seeking clarity. Do you mean for me to eliminate him? Leo paused. A flicker of disbelief crossed his face. Allan had never questioned an order. Leo stared at the man, temper flaring. Since when did a mere tool develop a conscience? He glanced at Evan nearby, hand resting on his sword. The air grew thick with tension. Something was wrong. Leo snapped, his patience gone. Allan, you are here to obey, not to think. But the command was cut short. Steel flashed. Allan's blade was buried deep in Leo's chest. It happened in a heartbeat, an act so abrupt, so violent, it felt surreal. Leo gasped, shock drowning out the pain. You. How dare you? Alman's face transformed. The loyalty vanished, replaced by a chilling smirk. He confessed with a twisted grin that he had enjoyed playing the role of a loyal dog, and that the charade had been amusing until now, but the game was over. He was never Leo's subordinate, but a hidden shadow of the mysterious Blue Moon sect. The truth hung in the air like a guillotine. We are disciples of the Red Moon. The Blue Moon is his sword, and today I strike by his will alone. For any soul foolish enough to raise a hand against the Great Moon, retribution was not just certain, it was absolute. To demonstrate the terrifying weight of his promise, he gripped the hilt, and with a sickening crunch, he twisted the blade buried deep in Leo's chest, tearing through flesh and bone before ripping it free, leaving the traitor shrieking in raw, unbridled agony, shrouded in an aura of freezing indifference. Alman revealed the chilling truth: he possessed the authority to execute judgment alone, and he had been patiently counting the seconds, waiting for Leo to utter those very words of treason, just so he could savor the moment, mocking him for wasting 2 entire years only to meet such a pathetic end. Leo, lifeblood pouring from his chest, yet eyes burning with spite, hissed that his shadows would hunt Alman to the ends of the earth. Leo claimed to have erased every trace of Avalon from the face of the continent. Alman simply sneered, reminding him that the Great Moon had offered mercy, but Leo had spat in the face of salvation. With a sweep of his cloak, Alman dissolved into the darkness, his silhouette scattering like smoke into the night air. The following morning, Allan awoke in the sanctuary of Rodwell, limbs stretching like a contented cat as he greeted the sunlight, declaring to the empty room that this was the definition of a good morning, convinced that Rodwell was a slice of paradise on earth, and that he had finally achieved the ultimate dream, the carefree, sluggish life of a wealthy noble. He rose at his whim, dined at his leisure, and bowed to no clock but his own. However, just as he began to visualize a future of eternal sloth, the door creaked open, and Yuen stepped in, eyes wide and innocent like a loyal puppy. "Young master, a missive has arrived for you," he whispered reverently. But Allan, deeply engrossed in the divine taste of his sweet butter, didn't even glance up as he snatched the envelope with lazy indifference. "What sort of nuisance is this?" he asked, his voice dripping with casual boredom. But the second his eyes scanned the first line, the bread slipped from his trembling fingers. His face drained of color, freezing in a mask of absolute horror as the words burned into his retina. "Following the demise of Leo Pelotoni, we summon Allan Rudin immediately." Allan's expression contorted as if he had just been blasted by a 400-volt lightning strike. "What is this garbage? My free trial of paradise expired after only 4 days. What the hell is going on?" He roared, panic rising in his throat. He began to hyperventilate, muttering, "Do they seriously expect me to drag myself back to the Pelotonia estate right now?" His frantic gaze darted toward his servant, but Yuen's reaction only poured gasoline on his anxiety. Yuen stood rooted to the spot, trembling, looking like a frightened animal in the presence of a predator. Then, dropping his voice to a conspiratorial, spine-chilling whisper, Yuen leaned in and asked, "Young master, exactly when did you ascend as the Shadow Leader? Why keep me in the dark? Was this terrifying secret truly necessary?" Allan's jaw hit the floor. Pure, unadulterated disbelief washed over him. He slumped into the corner, rocking back and forth, whispering, "This is madness. The misunderstandings are stacking up like a tower of doom. My life has gone completely off the rails." Tears of frustration welled in his eyes as he cursed his fate. "Will someone please tell me why I was dragged into this cursed narrative?" Seeing his master's distress, Yuen let out a profound sigh. "You are the sole beneficiary of this tragedy, young master. The moment we fled the estate, Leo was assassinated, providing you with the ultimate alibi to seize the Count's title." Allan was rendered speechless, stiffening into a statue of shock. Yuen continued with terrifying logic. "The competition is gone. With Leo's elimination, the path to the throne is clear. It implies only one truth: you are the hidden kingpin of the nation, the mastermind who orchestrated the death of a swordmaster." Yuen bowed his head, trembling in awe of this imaginary power. Allan, however, looked less like a mastermind and more like a kicked puppy. "Hey, you lunatic. Are you actually enjoying this nightmare?" he snapped, massaging his temples as a migraine of legendary proportions set in. "Where do I even begin to dismantle this delusion? There is no organization on this planet capable of instantly deleting a boss of the underworld. He froze as the gears in his mind began to turn. Hold on. If memory serves, there exists a specific group, predators who feast on other guilds. Yuan dipped his head in solemn confirmation. You refer to the Blue Moon? Allan's voice dropped. Perhaps they could be the puppet masters orchestrating this nightmare. A shadow hand moving pieces from the dark, but Yuan immediately rejected the notion. The Information Guild has already verified the facts. Blue Moon is innocent of this slaughter. Those assassins pride themselves on their signature. They always brand their kills. Yet here nothing remained. The Avalon members were not assassinated. They were butchered, pierced cleanly through by a single blade. Allan's pupils trembled as the terrifying truth clicked into place. So, he whispered, the gates of hell have finally been flung open. A shiver ran down his spine as the gravity of the situation crashed down upon him. That explains it. That is why I became the shadow leader who slew the swordmaster. In a heartbeat, Allan's demeanor shifted to icy calculation. However, he muttered, Blue Moon shouldn't even exist in the game's narrative. It is impossible for a mere fodder like them to execute such a calamity. They were destined to vanish before the main scenario commenced. So who in the blazes is the true culprit? Meanwhile, shadows gathered elsewhere. The perspective shifts to the hidden stronghold of the Blue Moon. Standing amidst the silence was a figure of breathtaking beauty and lethal grace. The leader, Yusa. She swept her gaze across her subordinates, a smile playing on her lips that sent chills through the air. Tell me, she asked, her voice light as a feather. Did any of you leave a single trace behind? Rena, ever the cool-headed professional, stepped forward with a sharp retort. Absolute zero. Not a shred of evidence remains. Rest easy, my lady. A low, mocking chuckle reverberated through the dim hall. Another figure emerged, dancing a dagger through her fingers. Wearing a fox-like smirk, she teased. Well, there was that one single leaf left resting on the corpse. This was Lamb, the wild card, the embodiment of chaos within the Blue Moon ranks. Before the banter could continue, the heavy doors groaned open. A voice, deep as the abyss, announced an arrival. Master, I have returned, Dennis declared, striding in. 486 soldiers of Avalon remained standing. Another man followed close behind, his massive blade resting casually against his shoulder. Raiden, known as the Sin of Mysophobia, grinned with manic excitement. Just as you commanded, boss. I diced them, shredded every last one into unrecognizable chunks. The thrill was delicious. In that instant, Yusa's face contorted into a smile that would make a demon weep. A crimson mist began to seep from her pores, her eyes shining with unadulterated bloodlust. Perfection, she purred, her voice dropping to a glacial whisper. Thus, the mighty Avalon, rulers of the Astria Kingdom's underworld, were reduced to ash in memory, all in a mere 15 days. However, Raiden shattered the celebratory mood, his tone suddenly devoid of mirth. I believe the purge was not entirely flawless. Yusa snapped her head toward him, her aura spiking. Explain yourself. Raiden stepped forth, withdrawing a crumpled envelope concealed beneath his coat. I recovered this from the corpses of the nobles allied with Avalon, he revealed. It appears the Altia Aduptum family maintained a connection far deeper than we anticipated. Yusa snatched the letter from his grip. Her eyes scanned the text, her expression plummeting into darkness. A heavy, ominous sigh escaped her lips. Then, the air exploded. Her aura surged violently, crushing the room under a wave of oppressive dominance. You all know what comes next, she declared coldly. Her comrades exchanged sharp, knowing glances. Dark energy erupted from the group. Their combined killing intent was thick enough to crack the very walls. A storm of blood was approaching. The Astria Kingdom was about to face its doom. Raiden gripped his hilt until his knuckles turned white, a savage grin tearing across his face. I will handle this personally, he whispered, his voice low and dangerous, and rest assured, execution will be flawless. Yusa released a soft breath, a faint, enigmatic smile gracing her lips. One final detail, she commanded, turning her gaze toward Rena. The Information Guild? Is the trail completely cold? Rena nodded sharply. Absolutely. This operation has been completely severed from the Blue Moon. Suddenly, Seal, Rang the embodiment of the sin of pride, reached out. He tried to snatch the document like a playful child, but Raiden intercepted the move with lightning speed. All guilds operate with the same filth. Raiden stated coldly, scattering the torn pages across the table like debris from a war zone. "They are calling it the Hell Sword," he continued, his eyes narrowing, "a weapon forged by the legendary swordmaster himself." Fragments of twisted metal and scorched parchment shimmered ominously under the dim light. Reina lowered her voice, sensing the tension. "Shall I maintain surveillance on their movements?" Meanwhile, Seal rang, unable to resist his nature, swiped at the paper again like a mischievous cat, earning a sharp, icy glare from Yusha. Yusha's smile turned cold enough to freeze the air. "Yes, keep watching, but heed this warning. That person must never learn of this. I have repeated this 1,000 times, and you all know the consequences." A heavy silence descended upon the room. Then, Deus, keeping his face masked in indifference, spoke up. Since that person's family was the primary target, it was not just an order, it was personal. Yusha's expression instantly turned to stone. In that split second, a terrifying image of Allan burned through her mind standing in the abyss, blade in hand, eyes void of all warmth. "So terrifying," she murmured to herself, her voice trembling. "We really are monsters, Smack, without warning, she backhanded Deus across the face. "A sword has no right to think," she hissed venomously. "The blue moon moves only when commanded. Remember this well, that person sees everything." The entire room froze solid. Not a single soul dared to draw a breath. Then Yusha's voice dropped, becoming dangerously soft. "So, do not disappoint him. Ever." Dees bowed his head, hiding his eyes, but inwardly, his mind raced. How strange. Someone as powerful as Yusha is trembling. She is paralyzed by the mere fear of him discovering us. Finally, the truth is clear. Everything is for the great moon. It is all for them. That night, the sky shimmered with pristine clarity, the full moon hanging above the world like a silent omen. The scene shifted abruptly. Allan sat slumped over his desk, drowning in a mountainous sea of paperwork. His face was deathly pale, his eyes hollowed by sheer exhaustion. "I cannot take this anymore," he groaned, burying his head in his arms. Since the funeral, it had been a full month of relentless, torture-like duties. "I am losing my mind." He collapsed forward, looking more like a corpse than a lord. Frustration boiled over Allan, scrambled up, standing on the table with desperation written all over his face. "I knew I had made enemies," he muttered darkly to the empty room. "But Leo's death, that was supposed to happen 6 years from now." He massaged his throbbing temples. "Because my brother died too soon. The entire scenario has shattered. The game has changed completely. Now, the crushing weight of the family's legacy rested solely on his shoulders." The work was endless. Suddenly, the door creaked open. A group of servants marched in, carrying yet another tower of documents. "Young master." An elderly retainer spoke, his voice trembling with nerves. "These require your immediate signature and review. It is urgent." Allan's hand froze in midair. He squeezed his eyes shut and let out a heavy, defeated sigh. Why is everyone working so hard all of a sudden? When the Count was alive, you all used to slack off and avoid work. Why change now? He complained aloud. The old butler stared at him, absolute terror filling his eyes. "Did you hear that? The young master is furious," he whispered frantically to the others. "We must work harder. I have no desire to die by his hand today." Dark circles deepened under Allan's eyes as the misunderstanding only grew worse. Despair washed over the man's face. "So the staff tiptoes around me because of that cursed rumor," he muttered bitterly. "That I am the secret mastermind behind it all." He slammed his pen down, the ink trembling with his frustration. "Why do they cower instead of answering when I call? I am no devourer of souls." He lowered his voice, the fire leaving his eyes as he sighed heavily. "I am just a former slave who seeks a quiet life and to do his job in peace." He collapsed back into his chair, drained of all energy. "If only they would handle the simple things without dragging me into the light every time," he thought, helplessness consuming him. Meanwhile, the savory scent of roasted meat filled the courtyard where Ivan was tending a fire, humming a cheerful tune. His gaze drifted toward the window, watching his young master with a look of reverence. "Truly, it defies logic," Ivan mused aloud. "To reach the second circle of poison arts after merely 2 years of solitary training is unheard of. Your potential is boundless, young master. When did you become such a monster?" Allan, who was chewing his barbecue with a stoic mask, lifted his gaze slowly. Faint wisps of mana danced around his silhouette like spiritual dust. Ivan pressed on. Most mortals require 4 years of grueling tutelage to touch that realm. Magic is a cruel mistress that demands genius. Allan nodded solemnly. Indeed. My aptitude is acceptable. He lied smoothly, but his inner thoughts screamed a different truth. I only trained to survive. Paranoia has been my constant companion. This power was the only shield I had. A pale light manifested in his palm, fragile sparks of mana flickering like dying embers. But what is the point? He whispered to the void. If I am still this weak. He stared at the pathetic glimmer in his hand. I have dabbled in every school of magic known to this world. He confessed to the silence. In the beginning, it was a thrill, a new adventure. I believed that if I played it safe, I could grow at my own pace. His face fell into shadow. But now, his voice cracked, trembling with suppressed fear. I am just a drowning man trying to save his own skin. He watched the light extinguish. The cruel reality is that my mana core is withering, draining faster with every spell I cast, and the tears stung the corners of his eyes as his knuckles turned white. Sniff. Nothing goes my way, he muttered, sounding like a lost child, the silence of the room amplifying his grief. Then Allan recalled the harsh law of magic. One's innate mana capacity is destiny, much like an athlete's natural weight class, and his mana haul was microscopic. No amount of hellish training could expand a container that did not exist. He felt utter wretchedness. Defeated, he stuffed his mouth with barbecue, drowning his sorrows in meat. If nothing else works, thus, Ivan suddenly produced a sealed envelope. Perhaps this will cheer you up. Your invitation to the ball has arrived. Allan sighed, eyeing the letter with suspicion. A ball, now. The scene shifted to a grand ballroom dripping with opulence and gold. Allan stood resplendent in noble finery. Even Ivan looked dashing in his suit, but the main character's face remained grim. I am already exhausted from the endless paperwork, he grumbled internally. This is absurd. He surveyed the glittering crowd, the grand aristocratic ball of the southern Austrian kingdom, in exchange for the elite. I'm about to secure my position as a counselor. I must use this chance to build my network. His eyes were sharp, calculating. But in the background, Ivan had completely abandoned decorum, happily raiding the buffet tables. Young master, why so serious? Ivan mumbled through a mouthful of food. Connections are the lifeline of a peaceful future, Allan lectured sternly. But suddenly, a deep rumble shook the entire hall. Allan watched in stunned silence as the crowd scattered in terror, fleeing from Ivan's overwhelming presence. A dark chuckle escaped Ivan's lips. Do not be too upset, young master, he teased with a twisted smile. Ivan's departure was abrupt, but Allan remained unfazed. He simply bid the man farewell. Yet, a bitter thought lingered. They must look down on me, a low-class upstart, lacking any true refinement. Allan scoffed. Unlikely. My family's lineage dates back to my great-grandfather's era. While the current Palladio family might be full of troublemakers from the East, I did not ascend to this position through mere luck or brute force. Now, it's time to unleash the social skills I've secretly honed. He confidently grasps a glass of wine, then turns to a beautiful lady. Hello, my lady, he purrs. This wine's aroma is truly exquisite. The young lady looks delicate, but Allan's gaze shifts back to the wine. Indeed, he muses. The scent is particularly distinctive, isn't it? As he speaks, his expression twists, making him appear unsettlingly villainous. A nearby companion cringes, whispering, That's creepy, but I wouldn't mind a few bottles of this at home. He mentally notes, a gentle smile truly is an essential social tool. But the young lady is already recoiling in horror, her face contorted in fear. She flees as if pursued by a monstrous beast. Father will hear of this, she screams. Prepare at once. Allan stands frozen, utterly disbelieving what just unfolded. He instinctively reaches out, trying to stop the fleeing lady. That's not what you think, he calls out, but his words are swallowed by her panic. He slumps, muttering, This is not what I was expecting. He then recalls a previous encounter. Was that man blackmailing them into giving him limited edition Palladio wine? He realizes that person is an even bigger troublemaker than his own. Siblings, who continue to whisper, speaking ill of Allan. But then, Yuen suddenly bursts out laughing. Young master, don't worry about it. Yuen chuckles. Allan tries to rationalize. I guess she must just be a particularly shy young lady, perhaps, but Yuen is quick to respond. Your loot pill has grown. Again, Paladine luxury sheets, finely crafted metalwork, rare tea, and especially that exquisite wine. Allan, utterly depressed, laments, I even studied wine for this. The Pelotonio family, it turns out, is meant for something far more nutritious than I imagined. And because of the rumor that I removed those monstrous brothers of mine, I seem to have become someone everyone actively avoids. My social life is utterly ruined. He watches as other nobles gather, their laughter echoing through the hall, a stark contrast to his solitude. Doesn't it feel, Allan muses, like they've gotten even further away from me than before? I need some fresh air, Allan declares, heading towards the balcony, but just then, a sudden presence. A striking red-haired lady, wineglass in hand, watches him with an intense, unwavering gaze. Outside, Allan stands on the balcony, enjoying the tranquil moonlight. Where did it all go wrong? He wonders aloud. Just then, a sweet voice breaks the silence. Excuse me. Hello there. May I have a moment? Allan turns, a blush creeping onto his cheeks. She's actually trying to talk to him, Allan thinks. Someone really spoke to me. Who could it be? He glances towards the door, utterly surprised. At that moment, a cute, beautiful lady steps forward. I am Laura, she announces, the third daughter of Duke Alai. Allan is stunned. Alai, he exclaims. That explains it. He manages a polite hello. His mind races the Alai family, one of the three major shadow players of Psychedelia, known throughout the land as the Northern Troublemakers. He closes his eyes in renewed despair. So, he sighs. There's no way she's a normal person. But then, he glares, a flicker of recognition in his eyes. Don't I remember? This girl from the game. He stares at her, noting her adorable appearance. I don't think she appeared in the game at all. He ponders. The girl, however, cuts him off. I will be blunt, she states. Please, lend me your strength. At that moment, Allan feels his senses reel, utterly astonished by her words. But Laura continues, her voice trembling. I am going to be assassinated soon. Please, help me. Please save me, she pleads. Allan's mind races. What am I supposed to do right now? Allan stares, mesmerized, as Laura's voice cracks with desperation. She begs, I'm in grave danger. My own sister will have me killed. Please, help me. Her eyes shine, glistening with unshed tears. She explains how she had lived a protected life, hidden away as the daughter of her father's mistress, until now. But the family's internal strife has worsened to a brutal degree, and her once secure position has now become deadly. The gears in Allan's mind spun rapidly. It made perfect sense why her name was absent from his memories. In the original timeline, she must have perished early on, reduced to a forgotten extra who never even made it into the game's script. Laura didn't back down. She clung to hope, convinced that the power he wielded was her only salvation. Desperation laced her voice as she made a staggering offer. Save me, and half of the Alai family's vast fortune is yours. Allan's expression tightened, a mix of disbelief and discomfort. The request was absurd. After a silence that stretched too long, he offered a stiff bow. I'm afraid I must take my leave. A heavy sigh escaped his lips as he turned away. His heart felt like lead. I pity her situation, he thought bitterly, but I can barely keep my own head above water right now. Giving her false hope would be the cruelest act of all. Despite the rumors, I am not the almighty hero everyone thinks I am. He glanced back one last time. Laura stood frozen, the despair of her grim fate etched into every line of her face. His voice was soft, barely a whisper. I truly wish you the best of luck. I pray you find an ally capable of bearing this burden. With those final words, he stepped away from the gloomy balcony, returning to the blinding glitter and chaotic noise of the banquet hall. But he wasn't alone. Deep in the shadows, Rhina's voice sliced through the silence. The target, Alita, has made contact with the great moon, she whispered. Dynas replied with chilling calm. Shall we inform the red moon of this development? Rhina shook her head slowly. No need. Our intel confirms that Laura is indeed of the Alita bloodline, yet she remains unconnected to Avalon. Highness's eyes narrowed into slits as his gaze pierced through the darkness toward Laura. She's the sole Alita who isn't on Raiden's hit list. That makes our job significantly easier. The rest of the Alitas will be purged. Rhina gave a curt nod. Agreed. We proceed exactly as the Red Moon commands. Our priority is total information suppression. Under no circumstances can news of the Avalon case reach him. Meanwhile, in a secluded corner of the party, Allan leaned against the cold wall, massaging his throbbing temples. Why does disaster always orbit me like a satellite? He grumbled. Is cursed stamped on my forehead or something? But before he could spiral further, and a melodic voice chimed in, shattering his solitude. Hello there. A young woman with hair like burning embers stood before him, radiating effortless charm. Allan blinked, caught off guard. Anxiety spiked in his chest. Wait, was that greeting actually directed at me? Could this finally be a normal social interaction without life-threatening drama? He straightened up, plastering on a polite mask. Lady Zenona. Her smile widened, dancing with amusement. Oh my, I'm honored you know my name. Allan nodded, keeping his voice steady. Of course. You are quite famous, in more ways than one. But internally, his instincts were screaming. There is no mistake. She isn't just a noble, she's another shadow player. I recognized that face from the game files. As she walked away, Allan's gaze lingered on her silhouette, his mind rapidly piecing together the terrifying puzzle. In the kingdom of Axria, 3 legendary figures rule the shadows, names that are only whispered in fear within the dark underbelly of society. First, Alita of the Frozen North. Second, Pelotonia, the Tyrant of the East. And finally, Geonia, the chaotic troublemaker of the West. Allan's eyes widened in realization. That woman, she is the West. The red-haired lady maintained her elegant facade, but every movement was calculated, like a predator stalking prey. Perhaps I really am that famous, she teased, her voice light but laced with hidden meaning. Allan forced another smile, desperately hiding the cold sweat forming on his back. So, she is the eldest daughter of Count Kyla, he analyzed. If the Eastern faction is a brute force gang, then Geonia runs a sophisticated, self-sustaining criminal empire. She doesn't just destroy her enemies, she devours them whole. He drew a ragged breath, desperately trying to steady his trembling nerves. All I need are useful connections. Just enough to secure a lazy, luxurious existence as a noble. Even though my surroundings are already crumbling into absolute chaos, for the sake of my easy life, I must avoid entanglements with a dangerous woman like her at all costs. Summoning his years of acting experience, Allan plastered a flawless, aristocratic smile onto his face. Your beauty is truly blinding tonight, my lady. She let out a soft, musical chuckle, but her eyes danced with a terrifying amusement. You flatter me with your kindness, she purred. Then, leaning in with a predator's smirk, she whispered, I find myself wanting to know more about you. Shall we chat? Allan executed a perfect bow, his voice steady as a rock, even while his survival instincts screamed at him to run. It would be my honor, truly. However, there are far too many prying eyes upon us at this moment. Internally, he was on his knees begging, please, spare me, just let me fade into the background. The crimson-haired beauty tilted her head, her sly smile widening as she dissected his soul. You really are just as the rumors described, she murmured softly. I shall look forward to our next encounter. Before Allan could utter a word, she turned on her heel, her blood-red hair shimmering like fire under the chandeliers as she glided away. He stood rooted to the spot, a frown creasing his brow. What on earth did she mean by that? Meanwhile, lurking behind the glittering facade of the royal ball, 2 cloaked shadows from the Red Guild observed silently. The information regarding the Avalon case is being contained perfectly. The female operative whispered. Her partner nodded, his voice dropping to a grave octave. However, a new variable has emerged. That target is still under surveillance. It appears they are hiding their true power behind a mask of mediocrity. Their gazes shifted toward the banquet hall, where ignorant nobles feasted. The male operative muttered, Headquarters has not sent new orders yet. Continue the observation. If necessary, eliminate them. With that, they vanished into the abyss. The following dawn, Allan and Yuen stood before the gaping maw of a massive canyon, Yuan hesitated, looking around nervously. Young master, are you certain is this truly the location you sought? Is this desolate place really the canyon? Allan stared ahead, his expression turning sharp and serious. The canyon walls were swallowed by an unnatural abyss of darkness, defying the high noon sun. It is midday, yet the shadows refuse to retreat. A grin spread across his face. Perfect. His voice vibrated with a strange, manic excitement. Yuan frowned deeply. Perfect. What do you mean? Allan's eyes shone with a fanatic light, the dark circles of exhaustion emphasizing his obsession. We finally found it. My true objective. The tyrant effect matches the lore perfectly. This is definitely the place, he muttered, clenching his fist in triumph. If this turned out to be another false lead, I think I would have actually wept tears of blood. But this is the real deal. He exhaled sharply, composing himself. In the original game, this location was trivial to find. But the only reason I traveled all the way south, using that ridiculous ball as a cover, was for this very moment. He pointed toward the void-like entrance, the labyrinth of whispers. Clear all 8 puzzle rooms, and you obtain a legendary artifact. Yuan blinked in confusion. You speak as if this world were merely a game. Allan ignored him, a faint, confident smile playing on his lips. I have memorized every route, every trap, and every solution. It is time to put my grinding experience to good use. Before them, the ancient stone walls rippled with arcane patterns. Allan stepped closer, tracing the glowing runes with pure fascination. Seeing the labyrinth's entrance in reality hits differently. Even though I have cleared this dungeon countless times on a screen, Yuan's brow furrowed deeper. Young master, how do you possess knowledge of this hidden place? Allan flashed him a mischievous grin. Oh, I've been here often. Yuan blinked, stunned. You have been here often. How is that possible? Allan laughed nervously. Damn it, I spaced out and said too much. Just a joke. Trust me, I have my methods. Shall we enter? Please. Do not jest with a face like that. Yuan muttered, his nerves fraying. Inside, the atmosphere was suffocating, heavy with mana. The dungeon walls pulsed with a rhythmic glow, breathing as if they were alive. Shadows slithered like vipers across the stone. Twisted beasts with glowing eyes lurked in the dark. Yuan's hand tightened white-knuckled around his hilt. One wrong move, one failed riddle, and those monstrosities will crush us without mercy. Yet Allan observed the shifting figures with a terrifyingly calm composure. So, that is the mechanic. Master, what are your orders? Yuan stared at him, a storm of worry and bewilderment in his eyes. How can he remain so tranquil in this hell? He wondered. We have fought side by side for 4 years, yet he remains an enigma. His missions defy all logic. Dismantling syndicates, rescuing orphans, settling strangers' debts, liberating slaves. It seems chaotic. Yet, miraculously, every erratic move he makes weaves a tapestry of perfect outcomes. Yuan shadowed him closely, stealing his resolve as he gripped his blade. That is why I follow him into the abyss, no matter how insane the path becomes. Allan deciphered the ancient runes and whispered, I see. The mechanism triggers when the seals align in harmony. Moments later, a guttural rumble vibrated through the labyrinth's very foundation. The colossal gates groaned open, stone grinding against stone with a deafening screech, but Allan's face drained of color. Finally, it opens. His voice trembled, barely a whisper. I think I might be sick. I knew the lore was cruel, but witnessing it in the flesh... He averted his gaze, forcing himself to ignore the grotesque carvings birthing from the shadows. He nearly snapped his neck, turning away, desperate to avoid the sight. Yuan exhaled a shaky breath as their footsteps were swallowed by the cavern's deathly silence. It seems the trial has ended, he muttered, lowering his guard. They stood in the treasure chamber. Walls shimmered with silver dust, while ancient relics lay scattered atop stone pedestals. But Allan's gaze locked onto a single artifact resting in the center. A modest obsidian ring, pulsating with a faint, ominous aura. Yes, Allan whispered. Secure the black ring. We leave the rest. Yuan frowned, lifting the artifact delicately. Of all the treasures, this looks like the most useless scrap here. Allan just smirked. Greed for the other items would only invite disaster. Leave them. As Yuen stowed the ring, triumph roared in Allan's mind. Finally, it is mine. The oath of restraint. For the first time in days, the knot in his heart loosened. Worry not, the path back should be clear of danger. But the moment they turned, the earth shuddered violently. Canyon walls cracked, splitting open like fragile shells. Yuen's eyes widened as colossi rose from the abyss. Ancient golems of stone and steel, their cores burning with lethal mana. Damn it, Yuen hissed. Ambush, this is the worst possible outcome. Gritting his teeth, he shoved Allan behind him. If I can just get the young master to safety, I will pay any price. But Allan remained still, his expression unreadable. No, Yuen, I will handle this. Are you mad? Whatever you're planning, forget it. We need an escape route, now. The golems unleashed a roar that shattered the air. Their massive frames lurched forward, every step quaking the cavern floor. Yuen screamed, "Please, young master, save yourself." But Allan's voice cut through the chaos, steady as stone. I invoke evolution, oath of restraint. The air warped. A cataclysmic surge of energy exploded outward, drowning the chamber in blinding light. Allan's consciousness was ripped away, pulled into the vast, infinite void of his inner realm. And there, a deep, primordial voice echoed through the emptiness. A fragment of a forgotten legacy, the overwhelming will of the nucleus. Declare your restriction, and I shall grant your desire. Allan froze, realizing the game's hidden event had triggered in reality. The legendary choice window materialized before his eyes. He clenched his fist in anticipation. The Vow of Restriction, a legendary absorption-type artifact. It grants explosive power, but only to those willing to shackle themselves with strict conditions. The voice boomed again, shaking the very foundation of his soul. What will you sacrifice for strength? Allan's heart pounded like a war drum. The presence felt terrifyingly real, as if the universe itself was waiting for his answer. He calmed his racing mind and spoke with nerves of steel. I swear to always weave the hand seals whenever I cast magic. The voice answered instantly, its tone calm yet absolute. Acknowledged. And what is the price of this shackle? Allan's eyes glimmered with the light of ambition in the darkness. I wish to bend the laws of this world to my will. A heavy silence followed. Then, the voice thundered like a judge passing a verdict. Your request is granted. The power of the vow shall now be bound to your soul. Allan stood firm in the void as divine pressure raged around him like a storm. He didn't stop there. He steadied his breath and spoke again, his voice cutting through the chaos. I offer a second restriction. Whenever I unleash magic, I will chant the ancient words of Babylon. The primordial voice resonated, heavy with curiosity. And what is it that you truly desire from this depth? Allan raised his hand, tracing intricate sigils in the air as particles of mana danced around him. Absolute power. The strength to defy the very logic of this realm. The entity let out a deep exhale, a sound that seemed to come from beyond the abyss. Allan broke into a cold sweat. Wait, did I miscalculate? I copied the exact skill icons from my past life walkthrough? But then, the voice spoke again, trembling with a strange resonance. By binding yourself with both the seal and the chant, you have unlocked the pinnacle of magical destruction. Allan's eyes went wide with awe. It actually worked. A confident smirk tugged at his lips. I knew it. My knowledge from the game, it finally paid off, and the majestic voice continued, its tone shifting from authority to reverence. Human, you who remember the lost gestures and the mysteries of the forgotten god, I entrust you with my entire essence. From this moment, you are the successor of my will. Allan's breath hitched. Successor? That wasn't in the game description. Before he could process it, the black ring on his finger began to glow with a violent, blinding light. He watched in shock as the artifact dissolved into pure energy, merging directly into his flesh. The restrictions had taken root. Allan clenched his fist, feeling a tsunami of divine mana crashing through his veins. From now on, this power is mine to command. But the divine voice echoed one final time, deep, infinite, and haunting. You are my successor, therefore, my gaze shall never leave you. Carry my will. Suddenly, the frozen world snapped back into motion. Allan gasped, the sounds of battle flooding his ears as Yuen's desperate scream tore through the air. Young master, move, the colossal golem roared, its mountain-sized fist crashing down toward Allan. Allan's eyes flashed with a brilliant, electric blue light. He slammed his palms together, weaving the signs and chanting the forbidden tongue of Babylon. Lightning exploded around him, a radiant storm of terrifying power. "The blade of thunder that severs creation itself," he whispered. The energy condensed into a pulsating orb in his palm, humming with the force of 1,000 storms. Even pouring my entire mana reserve into this, I haven't even hit the limit. A confident smirk tugged at his lips. It was time to unleash the true price of this power. He dashed forward, driving the magical orb straight toward the behemoth. Above the battlefield's roar, Allan's voice pierced the chaotic air. "Witness the penalty of absolute restriction," he proclaimed. "Refraction." Azure mana surged violently around his fists as his gaze locked on the target. His command thundered once more. "Rebound!" A shockwave of pure lightning erupted, rocking the massive golem to its very core. Then, Allan roared the final trigger. Blue lightning. Violet and azure arcs fused into a supreme magical cannon, manifesting a colossal magic circle. The sheer destructive pressure was suffocating. Thunder tore the sky apart as the golem swarmed. Allan stood immovable like a mountain. "I linked the refraction," he whispered, weaving 3 complex seals in the air. In a flash, pure electrical energy detonated. From his fingertips, a tempest reducing every enemy to nothing but dust. The entire cavern crumbled beneath the terrifying weight of his aura. Yuan, his loyal knight, stood frozen in shock. "Young master, how is this possible?" The words barely escaped his trembling lips. Only debris and fading sparks of purple mana remained in the silence. Dead silence filled the void, broken only by the crackle of lingering electricity. Yuan approached, his legs still shaking from the shock. That was godlike, but why the silence, young master? Allan offered no reply. With eyes cold as ice, he strode deeper into the abyss. Just where was he hiding such strength? Yuan questioned the empty air. "In 15 years of service, I have never witnessed such devastations." Was that truly mere second-tier magic? But Allan remained silent. His eyes swirled with conflicting thoughts, memories shattering and reforming like broken glass. "I barely recognized it myself," he thought. "It was never this broken in the game." He recalled the turn-based mechanics of Psychedelia, where spells required specific signals to charge. Chain lightning. Once a basic skill, it had evolved into a living, breathing calamity. 5 turns of chanting had supercharged the thunderblades. They fused into a cataclysmic storm surpassing his wildest calculations. His mind drifted to his awakening, and the pact made with that forgotten deity, the entity who guarded the forbidden secrets of ancient magic. "In exchange for the restriction of mandatory chanting," he mused, "I gained ultimate power. The legacy of a mortal who dared to touch the divine?" Returning to the present, a long breath escaped him. Still, for second-tier magic, that was absolute overkill. The output far exceeded my data. Even I am rattled. Behind him, Yuan let out a heavy sigh of relief. "We survived that hellhole," he said, emerging as lightning still danced across the horizon. Completely drained, the knight collapsed onto a nearby boulder. "That was harder than any war I fought," he groaned, watching the light return. After a pause, Yuan cursed under his breath. What kind of lunatic designed a dungeon like this? Allan let out a quiet, heavy breath as the words settled. His mind drifted into the abyss of the past. Now that I think about it, this place, the Whispering Labyrinth, had another name in the old world, a name known only to the veteran mapmakers. The players called it the Pavilion Labyrinth, a legendary dungeon that became common knowledge among the top-tier explorers. Allan's gaze sharpened, piercing through the darkness. System notifications from his previous life flashed before his eyes, overlaying reality. "Yes," he confirmed, his voice steady as he turned to Yuan. "This dungeon was forged by the swordmaster, Palladio." Yuan blinked, completely bewildered. "Pardon, who did you say?" But the knight's condition was critical. His legs gave way, his body trembling as his mana hit rock bottom. He stumbled forward, barely catching himself on Allan's shoulder to avoid collapsing into the dirt. Allan frowned slightly. "We march east," he commanded with absolute authority. 3 weeks of hell training await us. There is a hidden piece I must claim before we return. Yuan let out a weak, self-deprecating chuckle. "You are more relentless than any commander I've served," he whispered, exhaustion weighing down every syllable. Yet, in the depths of his mind, despair began to rot his spirit. What is to become of me? Came the bitter thought. I cannot even protect my own honor. I am a disgrace to the knighthood. But Allan, remaining the picture of stoic calm, offered a lesson instead of pity. Listen well. Aligning a sigil with the spell's elemental attribute amplifies its core potential. Selecting the perfect incantation refines its properties. That is the absolute law of this system. He recalled the old game mechanics. Back then, the visuals were static sprites, merely changing attack patterns. But here, in this breathing reality, every spell he cast evolved and transformed right before his eyes. Each chant carries a tangible weight now, he mused. My mana control, it has transcended my past limits. Once my mana core recovers, I will test the true extent of this power. Allan cast his gaze toward the silent night sky. Regardless, he whispered. The outcome was perfect. Silver moonlight cascaded over the mountains, bathing the forest in a ghostly glow. In that moment, a shadow detached itself from the darkness. A slender figure stood bathed in the pale light. Cold, predatory eyes reflected the moon. It was Reyna. She moved like a phantom, leaping from rock to rock in total silence, slipping into the very cave Allan had just exited. Her focus locked onto a stone tablet, weathered by time and engraved with ancient runes. The era of the outer gods. See, she deciphered the text. This is the lost script of the Alantha Empire. She tilted her head, reading the tragic history. For the sake of a friend left behind, the swordmaster Pelion held the line alone. Her expression grew heavy as she traced the seal carved into the cold stone. Reyna stood before the glowing artifact, her aura calm but vibrating with intensity as she pieced it together. Allan didn't just survive. She realized he repelled the invasion of the Dark Legion. Her voice echoed softly in the hollow cave. He slew Akaloka, the Heart Devourer, and even defeated the Empire's great guardian, Pelion. Channeling her mana, she began to recite an ancient verification chant that hummed against the cavern walls. I know the truth of this world, she declared into the void. For I am the successor, raised within the ancient library for this very mission. Suddenly, ancient grimoires materialized from thin air, floating around her. The pages flipped violently as streams of mana congregated in her palms. She cross-referenced the energy signature. It is undeniable. That represents the same power Pelion once wielded. A breath of pure disbelief escaped her lips. He is a monster. I always suspected the Bloody Queen was far more than what the history books claimed. She murmured into the void. Her presence defied all logic, a power that shouldn't exist. Suddenly, the shadows themselves began to twist and coalesce nearby. It was Yusa, revealing her true demonic manifestation. Her aura erupted like a volcano. The sheer pressure crushed the air around her. As her form stabilized, her blood-red eyes locked onto the ancient seal with terrifying intensity. Meanwhile, across the cavern, Allan observed the chaos, his mind racing like a supercomputer. He recalled the legends. Even the great moon once honored Pelin as an equal, a friend worthy of reverence. Yet that incantation she used is nowhere to be found, not even in the forbidden archives of the ancient library. His gaze sharpened into steel. So the moon's prophecy was true after all, he whispered to himself. Near the altar, Reyna's lips curled into a faint smirk. A rare, captivating smile graced her features as she spoke. To think I was pathetic enough to just follow orders all this time. How shameful. Deeper within the shadowy ruins, a whisper cut through the silence. You finally made it. A girl's voice drifted from the darkness. Stepping into the pale light was Dennis, a lethal shadow operative. His eyes held a terrifying, cold violence. The target in black has already advanced, he reported without emotion. The atmosphere grew heavy, suffocating. A storm of blood was brewing. Allan froze in his tracks. In his periphery, a boy appeared emaciated, with eyes like hollow pits, as if starved for centuries. Before he could even twitch, snap, the boy's neck twisted at a grotesque angle. The very air seemed to recoil in horror at the unnatural movement. Allan's combat instincts flared. He surged forward to investigate the anomaly immediately. Watching from a distance, Rhino's face turned grim. This is beyond my pay grade. I need to report this immediately, he muttered, retreating into the shadows. The scene shifts. High above, the pale moon cast a hauntingly beautiful glow over the world. Inside the sprawling estate of Count Gonaha, the noble lady sat perched on her bed, drowning in her thoughts. So, it was merely a rumor, she whispered. but an image burned in her mind, refusing to fade. Allan's gaze, cold, distant, sharp as a blade and empty as the abyss. Her fists clenched tight, and yet, he is the one everyone speaks of, she murmured. Her maid nodded respectfully. Yes, my lady. Count Gonaha is a man of immense power and renown. The lady's expression darkened. It is strange, she mused, that a recluse like me, who shuns society, is suddenly the center of attention. Babe, don't you find that odd, father? She faced the portrait of the late Count on the wall. Her voice dropped, dripping with malice. No one suspects the truth, that I am the rot destroying this noble house from within. While you played the fool? A sinister, wicked smile carved across her face. Black mana began to ripple around her. Her true, twisted desires leaked out, an ambition purely for destruction. Suddenly, her eyes snapped open. But how did they find out? There are too many rats watching me. Crash. A knight burst through her door, armor rattling. He shouted, Lady Clea? Her head snapped up, eyes flashing. Speak. You must come quickly, he gasped, out of breath. Moments later, Clea stood frozen. A horrific scene lay before her. A man sprawled on the floor, clinging to life by a thread. Her personal guard knelt, checking the body. The magical seal. It failed to activate. That means he kept his mouth shut. The secret is safe. Clea's crimson eyes narrowed into dangerous slits. He deliberately dumped the body in my chamber. She hissed, nails digging into her palms. Her shock melted into a wicked, bloodthirsty grin. So, they have finally discovered the truth. Her voice dropped to a sinister whisper. I was caught completely off guard. And they struck at my fatal weakness. Elsewhere, Allan's guardian knight lay sprawled out, snoring loudly like a lazy dog, oblivious to the storm gathering outside. Allan sat nearby, attempting to cultivate his focus, though his irritation was mounting. The ridiculous cacophony of his night's slumber was pushing his patience to the absolute breaking point. He let out a heavy sigh, muttering, What in the heavens am I going to do with this idiot? Yet, beneath the annoyance, Allan's instincts screamed that a lethal danger was closing in. Reyna and Dennis were already weaving their webs, piecing together the fragmented secrets of his identity. And lurking in the deepest shadows, the crimson-haired witch, Lady Clay, advanced her deadly agenda. She was a woman so thoroughly corrupted by avarice that she would mercilessly slaughter her own father's legacy just to seize absolute power. The dark history of her bloodline, her descent into madness, and the demonic force possessing her remained a terrifying mystery. Meanwhile, under the pale moonlight of the Atelier territory, Lady Loria sat rigid within her carriage. The reality settled in. She had made a grave miscalculation. She never imagined that a man like Allan could be underestimated so foolishly. In that moment, it dawned on her Allan had risked his very life to thwart the assassination attempt. Her mind drifted, contemplating the treacherous path that now lay before her. Comparing the power scales of the noble families, she whispered to the darkness, He is a monster you must never make an enemy of. Allan remained distant and silent, completely oblivious to the turmoil raging within her heart. Loria gritted her teeth, the bitterness rising. Stripped of my wealth and authority by those cowardly siblings, they are nothing but treacherous vipers. She recalled the humiliation, disgraced and broken, barely surviving by clinging to her father's fading mercy. Standing before her dilapidated villa, she muttered, Until now, I only drew breath because of father's protection. But now, what is left for me to do? As she stepped across the threshold, her maid gasped in horror. Lady Loria, you have actually returned. The entire household erupted into panic. Loria froze, her voice trembling with rising dread. What did you just say about my sister? Her mind spun, struggling to process the impossible. Those people would stab their own kin without hesitation. Suicide makes absolutely no sense. Her hands began to shake uncontrollably. Then, tell me what happened to my brother and Moirana. Before the maid could utter a single word, the heavy doors were blasted open. Two figures appeared in the doorway, her younger siblings looking as if they were moments away from execution. Lady Moirana teetered on the brink of death, when suddenly a mysterious voice resonated through the hall. Children of the fallen house, take this letter and step into the wider world. It was an absolute command sent by Allan, issued in the name of the Shadow Organization. Blue Moon. At that instant, Yisha stepped forward, aura blazing, and declared, The enforcer has arrived. Lady Loria stood her ground, clutching the mysterious letter in her trembling hand. She read the contents, her voice low but steel steady. This time, she murmured, every order has been delivered personally. Across the realm, every member of Allan's circle held similar letters, each containing their destiny and a new mission. Meanwhile, Leo Rang turned Arena, a predatory grin stretching across his face. Excellent. A new mission simply means a fresh opportunity for chaos. But the scene shifted violently back to Lady Loria's estate. She stood paralyzed, her eyes locked on the lifeless body of her cousin sprawled across the floor. What is this? A scream tore from her throat, answered only by the cruel laughter of a shadowed assassin. Eliminated, he whispered. Then he stormed deeper into the villa, leaving a wake of absolute chaos behind him. Gloria's heart hammered against her ribs. What in the heavens is going on? She cried, her voice trembling with terror. At that very moment, a phantom whisper brushed against her consciousness. It was Allan's voice. Great fortune shall be yours. The memory of those words burned vividly in her mind. He was the mastermind lurking in the abyss, biding his time to snatch the throne of power, the true puppet master behind the Count's estate. Every prediction Allan made had become terrifying reality. Paralyzed by the revelation, Loria's voice barely escaped her throat. So this is what he meant. Overnight, I have become the sole inheritor of the Alai domain. A tremor ran through her soul as the weight settled in. Just what kind of monstrosity have I struck a bargain with? The truth hit her like a physical blow. The assassins hadn't just vanished. They were butchered by the Blue Moon Guild, under Allan's direct command. But to achieve such a feat unnoticed, it was a twist so terrifying it chilled her blood. Yet, Loria forced steel into her spine. The bridge is burned, she declared with grim resolve. There is no turning back. I know all too well the fate that awaits those who dare to betray him. She inhaled sharply, her gaze a chaotic mix of mortal terror and unyielding will. The graveyards are full of examples. My only option is to walk this treacherous path to the bitter end. 2 months later, within the dark halls of Allan's fortress, a subordinate entered and bowed with absolute reverence. My lord, we arrive under the direct orders of the House of Alai. This correspondence comes from Lady Loria Alai herself. Allan's brow twitched. His composure momentarily cracked. From the Duke of Alai, he muttered, the title rolling strangely off his tongue. Beside him, Yuen leaned back, swigging from a bottle with casual disregard. He let out a low whistle. Damn, this vintage is exquisite. Allan shot him a sharp glance. Savor it. A single bottle cost thousands in gold, he remarked dryly. To think such a tribute would arrive, with the compliments of Loria Alai herself. He rose from his seat slowly, his voice dropping into a contemplative rhythm. It wasn't the old Duke, but young Loria who orchestrated this. But why deliver it to my doorstep? I almost feel a twinge of guilt for leaving her to the wolves last time. His gaze snapped to the messenger like a blade. Speak. What is the meaning of this offering? What is her game? The messenger stiffened, projecting absolute formality. The Duke prepared this personally and commanded it be placed in your hands. Allan froze. The air around him stilled at those two words, the Duke. Personally? The implications raced through his mind like lightning. Wait. Does this mean the youngest daughter, Loria, has ascended as the Duke of Alai? He stood rooted to the spot, genuinely stunned by the audacity of it all. Meanwhile, overlooking the Alai dominion, Loria stretched her weary limbs against the window frame. 2 months, she whispered, gone in the blink of an eye. Following her father's demise, orchestrated by her own treacherous in-laws, she had seized the succession ceremony and claimed the mantle. She was officially the Duke of Alai. To think I was once forbidden from even stepping foot in this office, she murmured, a bitter smile gracing her lips. The world believes my siblings died by accident. I evaded suspicion only thanks to the perfect alibi fabricated by Bob. And her expression grew cold, shadows falling over her eyes. Back then, my siblings crushed my secret organization like insects. By the time I returned from my mission, I was a ruler of ashes. I had lost everything. Her hands trembled at the memory. The realization that followed was a horror all its own. She paused, her mind drifting to the man in the shadows, Allan. He didn't save me, she thought with biting resentment. He exploited my desperation. He rejected my initial offer, maneuvering the pieces as if he had read the entire script of fate beforehand. Nearby, A naive court lawyer watched her, oblivious to her inner turmoil. He thought, Lord Allan must have been her savior. But deep down, the darkness knew the truth. Allan had never extended a hand to help Leah directly, a cold calculation he was beginning to regret. Loria continued her monologue, her voice steady but laced with melancholy. And yet, she murmured, Allan handled the aftermath with terrifying perfection, and just how many moves ahead has he calculated on this twisted board? I kept Father's death a secret to spare him the burden. But her expression darkened as a chilling realization struck her. Something here reeks of suspicion. Even Allan himself swore he had no hand in the assassination attempt on Lady Loria. So how could the Blue Moon organization slaughter her enemies while protecting her at the very same time? It was a riddle wrapped in shadows, a contradiction that defied fate itself. Loria's gaze sharpened like a blade. There is no doubt, she whispered. He reached out because he needed a puppet to control Eli. She closed her eyes, steadying the chaotic storm of her thoughts. I have united the underworld under my iron rule. But am I his honored ally, or merely another pawn in his grand design? Loria continued, her voice steady but heavy with contemplation. Even as the Duke of Altai, she murmured, I am nothing compared to the monstrous power Allan conceals. He wants something more. Her eyes narrowed to dangerous slits. That underworld broker. The one who thrives on pure greed. She is the fuel igniting his wildest ambitions, and Loria's gaze softened, a glimmer of understanding returning. But there is one thing he lacks that only I possess. The restoration of the Altai name. In that instant, Allan's image dominated her mind. A strategic prodigy treating the political world like a simple game of chess. The Shadow Ruler manipulating the very pulse of the Empire. Snapping back to reality, the dark night at her side broke the silence. My lady, focus only on the mission ahead. Loria nodded, her confidence returning. My noble benefactor, Allan, will make contact soon, she said with a serene smile. I only pray the tribute was to his liking. Yet behind that cheerful mask, a storm of cold calculation swirled in her eyes. Meanwhile, in Allan's territory, the messenger bowed low. Then, my lord, I shall take my leave. Allan nodded, but his mind had already drifted into the abyss of thought. Loria, the hunted woman is now the Duke. His thoughts raced. What the hell is going on? Beside him, Yuen frowned. Why are you making that face again? Allan remained silent. Deep in the labyrinth of his mind, something is wrong. The flow of events feels off. Flashback, 5 years prior, a time when Allan was far more arrogant and carefree. He leaned back as Yuen entered. So, you've ascended to Count now? Yuen asked with a grin. Allan smirked in return. Not officially, but come the new year, the title is mine to wield. He gazed out the window, his inner voice cynical. Becoming a count was never part of my plan for a lazy life. A heavy sigh escaped his lips. But for the sake of prestige, I'll play the game, dodge the succession wars, settle in Rodmill, and ride the government ladder. He chuckled softly at the irony. Once I adapted, the noble lifestyle wasn't half bad. Even the workload had its own twisted charm. On that fateful day, he handed Yuen a small card from their youth ceremony. By the way, Allan asked, his tone deceptively casual, any leads on the assassination that took Leo? Yuen's expression hardened instantly. Nothing yet, but the Information Guild is tearing the shadows apart to find it. We will know the truth soon. And thus, the memory faded, returning to the present. Yuen leaned back against the wall, a sharp glint in his eyes. Tell me, Allan, what is the real play here? Surely, we aren't wasting time on petty revenge or bloodshed in the Altai territory. Allan remained silent, the air heavy with unsaid words. Silence wrapped around him as he contemplated the shifting tides of fate. Perhaps these subtle deviations from the game's original script are merely ripples. The butterfly effect triggered by my own interventions. Regardless, his voice cut through the air with calm authority. I simply intend to be ready for any eventuality. Yuen chuckled low in his throat. Spoken like a true noble, my lord. Just now, you truly sounded like the Count. Allan's lips curled into a faint smirk. Very well, let us proceed with that assumption. He shifted his focus back to the parchment in his hands, his mind racing. What variables has destiny thrown my way this time? I wonder. As his eyes scanned the intelligence reports from the Blue Moon Guild, A warm sensation of pride swelled within his chest. Every single member was evolving, growing more formidable with each passing day, but none more so than the 5 children he had personally sponsored from the shadows of the orphanage. A gentle, paternal smile softened his features. Receiving these monthly updates has become the highlight of my routine, he murmured. Even though I have never gazed upon their faces with my own eyes, just reading of their relentless progress brings a smile to my face, like a father watching his legacy unfold. In that fleeting moment, the realization struck him with absolute clarity. Allan had been nurturing 5 extraordinary seeds from the darkness, acting as their guardian angel without ever stepping into the light. He looked down at the letter, his eyes tender. They have grown so magnificently. But then, a sudden question sparked in his mind. Come to think of it, exactly how many years have passed for them now? He asked, his voice tinged with confusion. Yuen raised a skeptical eyebrow. You are only curious about that now. He crossed his arms, leaning back with a knowing look. They are reaching the age where they must step into the ruthless world of society. In fact, some have already departed the orphanage. Allan's eyes widened in genuine shock. This was information he had completely missed in his calculations. Yuen continued, his tone matter of fact. Most of the children you personally saved are currently in that exact age bracket. They were all adorable, chubby little things back then, especially Seolrang, that feisty little kitten. She is definitively the wildest of the litter now. Allan blinked, unable to process the shift in time. Is that so? He muttered, sounding completely dumbfounded by the passage of time. In his mind's eye, he still pictured 5 innocent children, offering him pure-hearted gratitude for his silent patronage. Allan gripped the letter tighter, a warmth spreading through his heart. Very well. I suppose the time has come to cut the strings and let them fly. Yuen looked at him, stunned. Truly, aren't these the specific ones you kept within your sphere of influence for a reason? Allan reclined in his chair, his aura calm yet calculating. There is no longer a need for that, he stated quietly. They have matured splendidly. It is time I let them carve out their own destinies. Internal thoughts raced through his mind. Since I ensured they would never awaken as the 7 deadly sins, they should be capable of living normal lives now, correct? Yuen, who had been silently analyzing the data, nodded in agreement. Seeing as they are physically peak and healthy, yes, I concur. However, Allan's eyes narrowed into sharp slits as he mentally cataloged their monstrous potential. Each possesses a unique dominance, he whispered. Yusa, a prodigy born of divine faith. D is a natural monster with the blade. Rina, a genius intellect that surpasses modern research. Seolrang, unrivaled in the art of slaughter. And Raiden, a ruler born to lead armies. He tapped his finger against the mahogany desk, strategizing. If I position them correctly, they will shine brighter than any star. Yet, Allan remained blissfully ignorant of just how terrifyingly prophetic those words would truly become. The 5 children he raised were not sheep, but wolves. They would grow into calamities. The founders of the Blue Moon, reshaping the underworld's hierarchy in ways he could never fathom. Unaware of the storm his benevolence had unleashed upon the world, Allan smiled faintly. I suppose a farewell gift is in order, he mused. They will surely appreciate it, and it was part of my original design regardless. The evening sun bled through the window, bathing the room and his desk in a majestic golden haze. Allan rose gracefully, sealing the final document with a snap. All right, let us move out. Yuen stretched his limbs with exaggerated laziness. Well, silence is an answer too. I'm heading out. He yawned, turning toward the exit. Allan offered a subtle, knowing nod, clearly amused by his knight's utter lack of tension. Yuen waved a hand dismissively over his shoulder. Chow, if this gamble pays off, I expect a handsome bonus waiting for me. Allan shook his head, a faint smile gracing his lips at such carefree insolence. Meanwhile, in the main hall, Yusa lowered the letter, her hands trembling with anticipation. She gathered the others, her voice ringing with excitement. Listen up, new commands have descended from the master. The atmosphere shifted instantly. Unlike before, Allan had issued specific, individual directives to each member. But before unsealing their fates, Yusa insisted they review the previous correspondence one last time. The new instructions demanded absolute focus, echoing the gravity of their master's evolving will. Seolrang chirped up with innocent curiosity. noting that only Yusa had been privy to the first letter's contents. Yusa explained the shift in the wind. The fact that Allan had sent personal orders meant the time had finally come for every single one of them to witness the master's grand design. The mere sight of Allan's handwriting transformed the deadly sins into eager, curious kittens. Seolrang stumbled over the words, reading the opening line aloud like a sacred text. How have your days been recently? It seems you have gathered capable allies. Should you require aid, simply speak. Arena noted that it sounded like casual pleasantries, but Yusa's smile deepened knowingly. She understood the truth. Allan had intentionally used a simple greeting as a veil. Following that gentle opening, the first true edict of their mission was revealed. He had marked their elimination targets, assigned their destinies, and demanded absolute results. It was during this pivotal moment that he entrusted the blue moon to her care. As they looked around, they realized he had handpicked every single one of them, and their hearts raced at the prospect of serving him. Dees nodded solemnly. It is logical. Individual orders prevent any intelligence leaks to the enemy. She traced the ink of her first command, recalling the ironclad rule, understand the objective and fulfill the mission, no matter the cost. Dees then mused aloud, wondering if it would be more efficient to seek an audience or contact Allan directly through mana transmission. Raiden crossed his arms. If secrecy is paramount, physical letters are indeed a strange choice in this era. Yusa's gaze turned razor sharp. She reminded them that their duty was not to question, but to obey Allan's will. She crushed the letter in her grip, and Dees let out a heavy sigh at such terrifying devotion. Fine, Dees relented. Then let us decipher our marching orders properly. Moments later, glancing at her scroll, she announced her destination. I am bound for Caliban, the kingdom of knights. Seolrang scoffed, pouting about the assignment. She complained about the heat of the desert colonies. Raiden smirked. Revealing his path led to Rexy, the city of pleasure. Rena held up her command. Latina, the city of mages, awaits me. Finally, Yusa, radiant as the story's true heroine, took center stage. Her voice trembled with pride. I have been chosen to infiltrate the holy kingdom of Rise. Their paths were set in stone, inscribed clearly by their master's hand. Dees frowned in confusion. I do not understand the logic, but Allan has ordered me to become a knight. It felt absurd even for her. Seolrang added that Allan had also promised their financial support would remain limitless. Rena's eyes widened as she read further. He has even revealed the coordinates of hidden artifacts and gifts for us. Raiden remained the picture of calm. Do not overthink it. Once we arrive at our destinations, the Master's true plan will reveal itself. Yusa gathered the group, her voice steel as she engraved the final absolute command Allan had bestowed upon them. The name Blue Moon was forbidden a taboo never to cross their lips. With solemn vows, they dispersed into the shadows. As the sun rose on the following day, the members vanished, scattering to execute their master's will. 3 months drifted by. In the solitude of his office, Allan let out a heavy sigh. As he feared, the realm of magic remained stagnant. His eyes scanned ancient grimoires and advanced magical tomes, desperate for a breakthrough. He needed to push his limits alone. It felt absurd, yet he muttered that self-experimentation was the only path forward. Breaking his trance, his gaze shifted to his loyal knight standing guard. Yuan, he called out, his voice cutting through the silence. What is the status? A sudden thought struck him. He demanded an update on the shadow investigation regarding Leo's assassination. Yuan bowed his head. My liege, the Information Guild reports. Absolute silence. They found nothing. A flicker of surprise crossed Allan's face. He narrowed his eyes and asked, Is there truly nothing else to report? He whispered into the void. The butterfly effect triggered by saving the 5 deadly sins had spiraled completely out of control. Even Loya, a variable who was never meant to exist in the original storyline, had ascended to become the Duke of Alat. The sheer deviation from the script gnawed at his sanity. She was devouring the underworld, expanding her dominion and influence at a truly terrifying velocity. Allan let out a dry, weary chuckle. Tell them to cease the investigation into the Ascension immediately. It is a futile endeavor, he declared, and I already have a mountain of burdens weighing upon my shoulders. Yuan's eyes widened in genuine shock. Are you certain, Master? Allan explained with grim realization. This chaos was the fruit of his own ignorance regarding this world's depths. In a world like this, he mused, Nothing stays hidden from the Information Guild's web unless, An ominous chill ran down his spine. Even he felt a creeping dread of the unknown. If he pried into secrets meant to remain buried, the backlash would be far more catastrophic than mere failure. He muttered darkly, if curiosity leads to my death, then the truth is meaningless. Powers of that magnitude operated on a different plane of existence. They would not strike at him, so long as he did not foolishly meddle in their affairs. He clarified his stance to Yuen. There is no target on my back, unless I paint one there myself. That was the logic of survival in this ruthless world. Therefore, Allan concluded, the investigation into Leo's death ends today. Yuen nodded, accepting the command, but then a sudden memory sparked in his eyes. Ah, right. There is one more matter, he announced. Days has officially been knighted in Caliban. Allan looked up, a spark of genuine interest replacing his fatigue. Is that so impressive? 3 months passed in a blink. Yuen returned, this time bearing snacks and heavier news. Count, he began eagerly, you won't believe this. Deus has established an entire knight order of her own. Allan sat bolt upright. A knight order that implies she has already reached the expert level or higher. His mind raced. Could it be? Is she approaching the realm of a sword master? Yuen confirmed with a grin. Indeed. Deus has officially broken through to the level of sword expert. Allan fell silent, calculating. It had been mere moments in the grand scheme since her appointment. The academies are in an uproar, Yuen continued. They say a 5th Master Knight will rise within 10 years. Allan raised an eyebrow, sensing destiny at work. Deus, the future Master Knight. Do you speak of the one they now call the Sword of Caliban? Yuen chuckled. The very same. Her talent is monstrous. All of Caliban is trembling at her rise. Her blade garners more followers and glory with every passing day. Allan offered a silent nod of respect. She was evolving faster than he ever predicted. 6 more months drifted by. Nearly a full year had vanished since the 5 deadly sins departed the orphanage. Just as Allan had finally settled into the heavy mantle of the Count, the doors burst open. Yuen rushed in with urgent news. My Lord Count, urgent news has arrived. Allan's gaze sharpened as he demanded the report. Yuen replied, Danis has officially become the Sword of Caliban. The words hung in the air, freezing Allan where he stood. This revelation signified a single, terrifying truth. Deus had ascended to become the 5th Master Knight. Without missing a beat, Allan stated with deadly calm that such a title was reserved only for a sword master. He explained that the sword master of Psychedelia was no mere warrior, but a superhuman entity who had transcended the aura blade to unlock the ultimate power known as deviation. Disbelief washed over him as he looked at Yuen, asking if he truly meant that Deus had reached the realm of a sword master. Yuen interjected, clarifying that the boy was standing at the very precipice of that legendary level. He had not yet manifested his unique deviation, but the Empire had bestowed the title of Master Knight upon him regardless of the technicality. Not only had he crushed the 4th sword in a duel, but Caliban was desperate after losing a Master Knight to the northern barbarians. Allan fell silent, contemplating the weight of this news. He acknowledged that the 2 factions had been locked in a brutal war for over a decade. Yuen continued his report, noting that while mastering mana took 5 years, forging a deviation usually demanded decades of blood and sweat. Even the first sword, Reincarnated, had been 32 years old when he claimed the title of youngest Master Knight in history. That man had wielded a blade since the age of 5 and possessed strength that defied the heavens. Yet, even with such God-given talent, it had taken Reincarnated over 20 years to ascend to that peak. But now, Deus, a child who once knew nothing of the sword, was claiming the throne of a Master Knight. Allan's eyes widened in realization. If the boy was only waiting for his deviation, did that mean he had already eclipsed Reincarnated? It was undeniable. He would reach the status of a true sword master imminently. A subtle, calculating smile curved Allan's lips. Perhaps he could reap the benefits of this pawn far sooner than anticipated. Yuen silently observed the dangerous glint in his master's eyes. Allan glanced down at the letter with feigned surprise, murmuring that perhaps his influence had reached its limit. But Yuen immediately insisted that he should not burden himself with such guilt. Allan clutched the parchment once more, explaining that these missives arrived only from Yusa. Even after her departure for the Holy Kingdom, she remained faithful in sending her reports. Every letter was filled with updates regarding the 5 deadly sins she had been raised alongside. It seemed their bond remained unbreakable despite the distance. He let out a dramatic sigh. lamenting that although none had ever seen his face, they could have at least offered a word of thanks for his gifts. He paused, then lightly slapped his own cheeks to shake off the petty thought. He should simply be grateful they hadn't annihilated the entire kingdom after awakening as the 5 deadly sins. Allan whispered a soft confession. As long as they were thriving, his heart was genuinely at peace. The scene shifts to the beating heart of Krytham, the grand city of Caliban. Here, in the central district where the high nobility resided, stood the majestic headquarters of the illustrious Sore-Scaplift Knight Order. Within those hallowed halls, a sea of knights honed their swordsmanship in a symphony of steel. Standing at the peak of the hill was Deus, now clad in the full, imposing regalia of a knight. He was a mountain of a man, exuding an aura of calm and possessing a breathtaking handsomeness. His title echoed like a legend across Caliban Diesmark Lane, captain of the Sore-Scaplift Knight Order, the youngest master knight in history. Suddenly, a young girl waved at him with pure joy. Brother Deus returned the smile with warmth. He appeared far older and more composed than the boy in the memories. A self-deprecating smirk tugged at his lips. Even after a full year, the ghosts of the past still brought a flush of embarrassment. His mind drifted back to the day he lost everything to the black corruption, the moment his sister plummeted into the abyss. Deus had been consumed by an inferno of uncontrollable rage in his desperate bid to protect her. That hatred had been an anchor, dragging him repeatedly toward the precipice of madness. He had completely fallen into the darkness. The fact that the great moon had spared his life felt like a hollow victory. He had pledged his loyalty in the depths of despair, seeing no other road to walk. The echo of Yosha's voice haunted him, a constant reminder of the blood oath he swore to carve out vengeance with his own 2 hands. Serving the blue moon meant walking through hell. Yet, he never uttered a word of complaint nor faltered for a second. Every mission was merely fuel for his wrath, a step closer to slaughtering the black forces. Years of bloodshed passed, until finally, Deus received a direct command. As he broke the seal on the letter, confusion clouded his mind. This was no assassination contract. He was sent to a remote corner of southern Caliban to retrieve a specific gift. Indifference washed over him at first. What use were gifts to a man who had already lost his entire world? But the moment he arrived, the truth hit Deus like a thunderbolt. He realized what his master, Allan, had prepared. Standing there was his sister, alive, unharmed, waiting just for him. His pupils shook violently as his gaze fell upon the letter's final words. The great moon's gift is your family, returned from the abyss. Deus crumpled to the ground. Hot tears flooded his face as he charged forward, crushing her into a trembling embrace. She froze, eyes wide with shock, unable to process the miracle standing before her. To him, she was a treasure worth more than his own existence. Deus held on as if she would vanish. His voice cracked, choked by sobbing. He couldn't grasp it. The sister he mourned, the sister he thought dead, was breathing right here. A storm of agony and relief raged inside him. He pulled back, desperate to know her story. Stilla wept with him, clutching his arm, a gentle smile breaking through her tears to comfort him. Once the storm settled, they sat together, the warmth of tea between them. Taking a steady breath, she began to unveil the past. After being dragged into the shadows, she was imprisoned in endless darkness for an eternity. As she spoke, the nightmare resurfaced in vivid detail. She was confined in a pitch-black void, simply counting the seconds until her execution. But when death came knocking, a terrifyingly powerful presence intervened. A hand reached into the abyss, pulling her toward the light, granting her a second chance at life. Years later, as slave traders circled like vultures, another guardian stepped from the shadows. Cold steel sang through the air, cutting down her attackers in an instant. Her savior was none other than Yuen, the loyal knight of Allan. Back in the present, Stilla revealed that a mysterious sponsor had provided her with rare elixirs. With absolute certainty, she recited the sponsor's promise. Her fingers tightened around Allan's letter as she spoke. The letter was delivered personally, and Allan's support never wavered, not even once. The signature burned into the paper Allan Pallastonio. The message made it clear every resource was sent explicitly for Stilla's survival, and Allan himself had given the order to ensure it reached her hands. In that heartbeat, Deus realized the Great Moon had been orchestrating everything for her sake. Allan knew exactly what she meant to Deus. Stilla beamed, saying her benefactor's grace was beyond measure. She owed him a debt of gratitude deeper than the ocean. Allan had operated from the shadows, using his night yuan to protect them while keeping his identity veiled. Dew stood frozen. Shock paralyzed his expression as he whispered the truth. The great moon had protected her under his real name. His mind reeled, unable to comprehend the magnitude of this favor. Meanwhile, Danis was reeling. How could the great moon possibly know about their plight? He had never breathed a word of his family's secrets to a living soul. Only Yusa had ever detected the shadow of the black lamp that had marked him for death. His grip tightened on his own shoulders, trembling. How did the great moon see through everything? To the rest of the world, he was simply a legend. The great moon, the unparalleled prodigy who wove history itself like a tapestry. A being who held every hidden truth in the palm of his hand. Suddenly, memories flashed through Danis' mind like lightning. Fragments of the past. Moments tied inextricably to Yusa. Confusion and disbelief warred within him. Until the scattered threads snapped together, the puzzle was complete. He had never understood the fear in Yusa's eyes whenever she whispered the name of the great moon. The tremor in her voice. And her constant warning, a sword is nothing without its master. It must never act alone. A cold darkness washed over him. The realization struck hard. The fool had been him all along. And yet, in that abyss, a single spark of hope flickered. An ancient whisper echoed in his memory. The great moon knows all. He leaves crumbs of destiny for the child left to survive in the dark. His entire body shook violently. The weight of the truth was crushing. Danis! Styla's voice snapped him back to reality. Why do you look as if you've seen a ghost? But internally, Danis knew. His blade, his will, had dared to move without its master. And yet, the great moon had shown him mercy. It became terrifyingly clear. Allan, the great moon, had orchestrated Danis' entire existence like a grandmaster moving a pawn. Danis! So whispered into the void. All these years, consumed by hatred for the black sheep, blinded by vengeance. He had missed the hand guiding him. Danis. Mon turned his gaze toward his sister. Her smile was radiant, carrying the relief of a soul finally emerging from a long, unending nightmare. She had survived. She had served the great moon and protected their bloodline. To him, her life was a miracle beyond price. His mind raced back to Yusa's old warnings. One day, you will understand why I follow him, why I fear and revere the great moon. Danis finally saw the truth. She wasn't a fanatic. She wasn't blindly obedient. She had earned the name of Caliban and the title of knight through sheer will. Yet she prayed to Allan as if he were a deity. And now, he understood why. Steel hardened in his eyes. A new resolve took hold. He swore an oath then and there. He would ascend to the pinnacle of Caliban. He would become a master knight. And he would forge a personal order, an elite blade composed of the finest swordsmen, dedicated solely to the great moon. He finally grasped why Yusa called Allan her savior, her god. It wasn't fear. It was absolute, unwavering loyalty. Fueled by this burning purpose, Danis embraced his destiny as a sword master and the founder of his new order. The legend of their rise had begun. Time passed, and one day, Danis stood high upon the balcony. A towering knight approached, bowing low. My lord, the time has come. Danis stepped forward, his gaze sweeping over the sea of steel below. This expedition, he declared, will be the foundation of the solar skeletons. Let the hardships come. He was ready for anything. He tightened his grip on the mesmerizing, terrifying blade, swearing to repay the great moon with a tribute of blood and gratitude. His eyes burned with dark determination, his loyalty to the generation's greatest prodigy unshakable. Under the pale moonlight, he vowed to carve his name into history. With that resolve, the Solar Skeleton Knights marched forth to purge the barbarian lands. Thus sat in silence, watching them go, realizing his subordinates had finally evolved into true warriors of the abyss. Meanwhile, Allan buried himself in his Tomi, muttering that the world had left him in solitude, but he craved no distractions. His life was a storm of chaos, yet he forced his mind to find the eye of the hurricane. He scoffed at his own messy scrawl, promising to write like a human being next time. Fresh from his conquest of the labyrinth, he dove straight into decoding the ancient runes he had uncovered. A low chuckle escaped his lips. The final piece of the puzzle was in place. Leaning back, he mentally assembled the complex theories he had been dissecting: the reinforcement of magical imprints and the volatile behavior of refraction. Refraction did not just bend light, it amplified the imperfections within a completed spell, allowing its destructive rage to expand, while repulsion warped the very structure, altering the trajectory of the fired projectile. It was a phenomenon that defied common logic, but with the universe law in his grasp, he could rewrite the absolute rules of reality itself. His data confirmed that blue light acted as a hyperconductor for parallel magic, specifically lightning attributes. He theorized that lines of diffraction would grant absolute penetration, ensuring a critical hit every time. It was the same principle that had obliterated the massive golem earlier. One moment the giant stood tall, the next, it was vaporized into nothingness. For a mage, the rule was law. A single mismatched syllable meant failure, but the cost was steep. With his current mana reserves, he could unleash only one cataclysmic spell per day before exhaustion crushed him. It had taken ages to grasp just this sliver of truth, and the world's limitations weighed heavy on his soul. The ancient hand signs and phrases of the lost, Luina style, had vanished from history, leaving no trace behind. The records were empty. He was forced to walk this path alone, rebuilding lost arts from scratch. Yet, a twisted smile formed on his face. He found himself addicted to the impossible challenge, his desire for mastery surpassing his need for survival. He pressed his fingers together, weaving the spell he had spent 2 agonizing months refining. The air screamed as crackling purple energy materialized before him. Allan narrated the process, noting that collapsing the mana phrase's focal point would force a chaotic imbalance. A condensed sphere of violet lightning manifested. To Allan, it was a weak prototype, a mere fluctuation spell. But the moment the chant ended, a shockwave of thunder blasted outward, locking the structure into place. He began the second chant. Compression. The magic cannon tightened, the ancient phrases deconstructing and rebirthing into a weapon of mass destruction. With the final hand sign, the spell's true purpose awakened. A violent thunder cannon erupted, a pillar of purple wrath piercing the heavens. A cataclysmic surge of mana erupted, shaking the very earth as a tsunami of blinding blue lightning crashed across the field. Even Allan stood rooted to the spot, unable to comprehend the sheer devastation he had just unleashed. The sequence of the incantation was the absolute key. When he had attempted to initiate the breakdown sequence first, the spell had shattered instantly. But then, a voice pierced the silence from behind. Impossible. Allan spun around, his senses on high alert. His eyes widened in disbelief as the dust settled, revealing the intruder standing there. It was Kalia, the Crimson Witch, the patricide who slaughtered her own father, and the woman who sought to make Allan her obedient puppet. Her trembling gaze was locked onto the crackling remnants of mana still dancing in the air. Her butler's face went pale. Origin magic. To wield origin magic. That places him at the level of a 7th circle archmage. Allan flinched, the term striking a chord deep within him. Origin circle. In all his years, he had never heard his power defined by such a title. Yet, the reality was undeniable. Someone had finally given a name to the monster he had become. A scoff escaped Allan's lips as he watched them gaping at him with those absurd, stupefied expressions. He truly wondered how people of their high status could look so utterly pathetic in the face of true power. Their foolishness dragged a buried memory to the surface, back to his days at the academy, and that insufferable professor. It was during his time in Clyburn, the kingdom of knights, where that man had lectured him on the laws of power. He claimed that one could only establish a true order after receiving the king's royal decree. But Allan's original path was never about titles. He became a mage for one reason only: survival. He sought power solely to protect his own life and shield the few people he actually gave a damn about. Yet, that arrogant professor never looked at him with respect. Instead, he treated Allan like a remarkably bright pet, patting his head with the flat of his blade as if taming a beast. He called Allan a prodigy, claiming him as his personal trophy, begging him never to leave the kingdom because he was too precious to lose. To the outside world, it looked like affection. But to Allan, that patronizing gaze was nothing but a source of endless irritation. His magical prowess did not belong to that man. Not a single drop of his mana was inspired or shaped by that professor's teachings. Every incantation, every theory, every deadly refinement, he had forged them all through his own blood, sweat, and solitary research. But the time for memories was over. The storm was approaching. Fate was turning a new page. as Allan prepared to unveil spells far more catastrophic than lightning. Meanwhile, Kalia, the blood-stained usurper who aimed to seize the throne, stood before him once again with her shadow. Allan had never once offered her aid, yet she persisted, weaving her poisonous webs, scheming to devour his power for her own selfish ambition. She plotted in the darkness, but she made one fatal miscalculation. Allan was always 10 steps ahead. The moment he saw through her greed, he decided she would not use him. He would use her as a pawn in a game she couldn't even comprehend. Inside the imposing walls of the Platino estate, the red-haired Lady Kalia sat. In the suffocating silence of the reception room, her loyal butler stood like a statue beside her as she fought to calm the chaos in her mind. But her heart raced, the terror of that first encounter with Allan still fresh in her soul. She had come with 2 clear objectives. First, Allan was the trump card she desperately needed to strike a fatal blow against the Kingdom of Gonia. Second, she had to verify the true allegiance of Count Loria Platino, and gauge just how much monstrous power Allan had absorbed from the Platino bloodline. As she steeled her resolve, she finally opened her mouth to address the mage's brilliance. To her, Allan was a true prodigy, a great moon rising with potential that was simply immense and unmatched. She could easily picture him wielding enough power to crush the entire territory within his grasp. With the backing of the Blue Moon organization, his future wasn't just bright, it was terrifying. Suddenly, her butler began to tremble, completely unable to hide it. The mere mention of Allan's strength had stripped him of his composure. Kalia glanced at him, shocked that a man of his caliber would react this way. To think that a mage as arrogant as him would shake in his boots because of Allan. Her butler, Benjel, was a 5th-rank mage, an exile cast out of the tower for his inhuman experiments. His power was undeniable. He was a walking calamity capable of wiping out a battalion with a single spell. In all her years of patronage, he had never bowed his pride to a living soul. Yet, Allan made even a monster like him shudder. Kalia studied her butler. The sheer terror etched on Benjel's face was deeper than anything she had ever witnessed. A cold chill raced down her spine. She realized she could feel the fear radiating from him, a sensation she never imagined possible. A disturbing thought took root in her mind. Could my own mage be powerless against this prodigy, Allan? And could that boy truly have reached the legendary realm of an origin mage? The possibility tightened her nerves to the breaking point. But before she could steady herself, Allan threw the door open. His expression was a mask of ice, cold and utterly unshaken. He looked straight through Kalia and Benjel, his voice void of any warmth. "What business brings you to the Count's estate?" Kalia answered, forcing a calm she didn't feel. "I apologize for the sudden intrusion. We are on the Count's land. I simply lost my way and hope to find you." "Count?" Allan scrutinized her and replied, "I will not hold it against you, Lady Gonia, but tell me, what is the real purpose of your visit?" His gaze remained hard as steel, his tone sharp, with no trace of gentleness. He sat on the sofa with the heavy confidence of a ruler before continuing. "Let me make one thing absolutely clear. The power you witnessed earlier was not the magic of an origin mage. If you must assign a rank to it, it is closer to the 2nd rank." He shifted his eyes to Benjel, ensuring the message sank in. "I am sure you sensed it, mage. That magic has no utility. It serves neither defense nor offense." He paused, his voice dropping into a lethal warning. "In other words, keep your mouth shut about what you saw." Kalia and Benjel froze in terror. She felt her breath hitch and immediately responded, voice trembling. "Yes, Count. I must have misunderstood. I will not breathe a word to anyone." Shock flickered across her face as she added softly, "Benjel was just confused." Allan exhaled slowly, feigning calm relief. "Good. That is reassuring." Allan, the great moon, the prodigy she both feared and admired, continued in that same steady tone. "Since the misunderstanding is cleared up, what is the real reason for your visit?" Kalia gathered her wits and responded with a polite bow. "We were nearby on other business and wished to pay our respects." "There is no urgent matter," Allan pressed. She denied it instantly. "Truly, there is not." Allan rose, his presence looming. "Regrettably, I have work to attend to. I cannot spare time for idle conversation." Understanding the clear dismissal, Kalia stood and bowed. "I understand. I am grateful that you granted me this audience, brief as it was. I shall take my leave now." However, just as she turned to depart, Allan's voice cut through the air. If you are merely seeking a conversation partner. Kalia froze in place at his unexpected remark. His next words were cold and detached. You would be better off visiting Duke Eltai. I have a feeling the two of you would get along quite well. She blinked, her mind racing. What was Allan implying? What kind of scheme was hidden behind that suggestion? Suppressing her doubts, she bowed with perfect etiquette. I have heard your counsel, and I shall take it to heart. I will pay a visit to Duke Eltai's estate. Moments later, she and Benjel stepped out of the looming mansion, leaving the Count's domain behind. Back at the entrance, Allan stood side by side with his loyal knight, Yuen. Watching the carriage retreat, Yuen voiced his suspicion. That was the Gonia family. Why would a ruined house from the west seek us out? Allan replied with effortless indifference. I haven't the faintest idea. Nothing comes to mind. Yet, beneath that calm facade, a troubling thought surfaced. Good grief. This is becoming troublesome. As he gazed out from the mansion, Allan's mind tightened around a single, dangerous possibility. If word gets out that I wield origin magic, those desperate for power will come hunting like wolves. And this world is nothing but a ruthless dark fantasy. An assassin could strike at any moment to kill me and steal my abilities. The mere possibility is suffocating. Snapping back to reality, Allan muttered softly, ensuring only Yuen could hear. You understand what I truly mean, don't you? There is absolutely no reason for the House of Gonia to approach the Altai family. Those two bloodlines are sworn rivals in the underworld. A cold tension settled deep within his chest. In any case, do not come to me alone again. Meanwhile, inside the rattling carriage, Kalia finally broke the heavy silence. Count Palestine's power. Was it truly origin magic? Benjel trembled visibly. No, it was not. Kalia pressed on. Then explain your reaction back there. What did you see? Benjel took a slow, shaky breath, fear strangling his voice. Origin magic is created by drawing new laws onto the canvas of the world's absolute, immutable principles. That is a privilege reserved only for a supreme archmage. His expression twisted as the memory of what he witnessed clawed at his mind. But the Count, he was completely different. His eyes widened, filled with raw, unadulterated terror. When I opened my observation eye, I didn't see him drawing on the canvas. I saw him tearing the canvas itself apart. He recalled the overwhelming presence of Allan, the great moon, a force that felt omniscient, crushing, and absolute. Benjel continued, his voice trembling uncontrollably. He twisted absolute principles with his bare hands, freezing lightning in place, collapsing the laws of physics, yet still manifesting a spell. It was a miracle so absurd, it defies all reason. Kalia stared at him, stunned into silence. Benjel leaned forward, his gaze sharp with desperate conviction. Behind that power, I saw something dark, something demonic, an eye capable of manipulating every law of this world. His voice dropped to a haunted whisper. It was unmistakably the authority of a forgotten great god. He clutched his head tightly, shouting, I must stop. Thinking any further, is dangerous. Gasping for air, he continued, I was once praised for studying forbidden knowledge, magic from the forgotten era. That is why I am certain. His voice turned as cold as ice. Do not oppose Count Palestine, and never, ever make him your enemy. Kalia let out a brief, stiff chuckle. She gritted her teeth, forcing her chaotic thoughts to settle. So, there is no point in trying to uncover his true intentions, she muttered inwardly. Perhaps Allan truly meant what he said. Perhaps it really is best to visit Duke Eltai, just as the Great Moon himself advised. And so, 2 years passed since the children were sent off to walk their individual paths. Within the suffocating silence of his office, Allan's voice cut through the air. Report. Is there any new intel specifically regarding that brat? Ivan shook his head solemnly. Nothing on the children yet. Count, however, there is another development. Allan glanced up, his expression masked with indifference. Speak. Ivan delivered the news, and it struck with the force of a lightning bolt. County Gonia and the Altai Duchy. They have formed an alliance. Allan froze, his blood running cold. What the hell did you just say? The two pillars of the underworld have united, Ivan confirmed, his voice grave. On the surface, it appears harmless. But make no mistake, in the shadows of the underworld, the alliance is absolute. Allan dragged a hand down his face, frustration radiating from him in waves. I poured my blood and sweat into raising those little sinners. And this is my reward. The world hands me a shadow alliance that could swallow us whole. Is the Astria kingdom going to collapse next? Exhaustion washed over him like a heavy tide. Then, a creeping fear gripped his heart. No way. Surely she didn't. Kalia couldn't have taken my sarcasm literally, could she? The memory of his cold suggestion played back in his mind. Visit Duke a lie. He had said it in jest. He certainly never meant for her to actually forge a blood pact with him. He slapped his forehead, the sound echoing in the room. Come on. Surely it is just temporary. With Kalia's personality cold, arrogant, hostile, it should be impossible, but I must prepare for the worst. He snatched up his pen to draft a letter. Kalia, if I came off as blunt, or if my words seemed cold, I had no intention of insulting you. He stared at the ink on the page. This doesn't sound like an excuse at all. Still, he folded the letter and handed it to his subordinate. UN, I am entrusting this to you. UN nodded sharply. I will deliver the message to Lady Gonia through the Machinery Guild immediately. And I will continue the search for the missing children. Allan sank back into his chair, eyes scanning the reports. I wonder, what are Randon and Sharang doing at this very moment? Even Yosha. His gaze landed on a blood-stained letter the duo had sent upon reaching their destination. Sharang. She wouldn't have perished. Right? The thought was dark, a whisper of dread, but it slipped out. He forced himself to continue reading. If they followed my instructions and located the gift, they should have awakened their warrior symbols by now. Perhaps they even managed to escape the clutches of Baba Yaga by some miracle. Allan reviewed the data on the golden mana beast gauntlet, the legendary treasure he had bestowed upon Shirang. That girl holds something of immense value. She wasn't born with the sin of pride. She had the potential to become a legendary warrior rather than a fallen sinner. He let out a deep sigh. It was right there in the item description. If only I had told her about the treasure's hidden value. She could have sold it for a fortune or used it to build an army. With talent like hers, she could have carved out a life anywhere in this wretched world. His gaze drifted toward the balcony, fixing on the endless horizon stretching beyond. After all, he murmured, his voice low and intense, this land is a place where anyone can seize the world through absolute strength. Meanwhile, night draped the desert colony in a quiet, shimmering glow. Deep inside a hidden cavern, Sharang stretched her arms with a weary yawn, waving her hand as she marched forward. At last, she murmured, a cheerful spark in her voice. The ordeal is finally over. She lifted the golden gauntlet, the divine artifact that Allan the Great Moon had entrusted to her. Oh, Great Moon. Thank you, she whispered, her eyes sparkling with reverence. This gift is truly incredible. Clutching the gauntlet with deep affection, she recalled the pale gold, kitten-like spirit that had manifested earlier. I always believed the essence, Tzul, and of the Golden Mane tribe was just some superstitious charm, she said softly. But what I heard as a child, it wasn't a fairy tale at all. Buried memories began to surface. Her mother's gentle voice, the warmth of a home long lost, and her tribe's forgotten pride. Our people, the Lenjin, we are the true descendants of the Golden Mane tribe, her mother had once told her. The absolute rulers of all beastkin. The essence of the Golden Mane tribe is a supreme relic passed down for centuries. It grants the wielder unmatched power and divine authority over the wild. Returning to the present, Sarang stood frozen in the desert cave, having discovered that very essence. The instant she donned the golden gauntlet, agony exploded through her every nerve, viscerally real and completely overwhelming. She was forced to face trial after trial within her own consciousness, each challenge tearing at her sanity. But she endured. Staring at her hand, she whispered, I nearly died as a mere lab rat once. Yet, the Great Moon saved my wretched life. The memory stung her heart. She was an abandoned orphan, treated like trash, but Allan had rewritten her fate. He gave her the power to exact vengeance upon the Black Dragon, the monster who slaughtered my parents, she vowed, her voice trembling with raw emotion as she clenched her fist. A golden aura erupted from her palm, flooding the cave like sunlight piercing the abyss. I must repay the great moon's grace, no matter the cost. Energy surged violently from her core, the golden essence blooming outward with enough force to shake the very dust from the walls. She stared at her glowing hand, eyes wide with awe. This gift was never meant to make me a simple gladiator, she muttered. It is something far greater. Testing the gauntlet's strength, she felt the ancient lineage roaring within her blood. I must become the strongest gladiator alive, gather the scattered golden mane relics, and restore my tribe's glory. The golden light flared again, brighter, fiercer, and unstoppable. Raising her hand toward the heavens, she declared with absolute resolve, I will slay the black dragon. Moments later, Surang stepped out of the cave, gazing up at the beautiful, luminous moon. With steel in her voice, she said, all of this is for my savior. Let the conquest begin. Trembling with excitement, she continued, the golden mane, who commands the greatest of all beasts. Kind, the kings among their race, shall rise again under the blue moon after 500 years. Sarang was now forging a true path for the resurrection of her people. Allan had truly granted her the weapon needed to build an army and take her revenge. But who exactly is Gonia, and why is she obeying Allan's commands? Why did she suddenly form an alliance with Duke Eli? What is her true objective? What kind of twisted scheme is forming in her mind? Knowing Allan is the prophesied villain of the Holy War. As for Allan, how will he prove that he holds the true origin of magical law? As Allan reviewed the documents before him, a small detail triggered a vague, distant memory. Before the thought could settle, Yuen broke the silence. The Information Guild obtained news about the children, Yuen reported. I meant to tell you at the training grounds, but it slipped my mind. Allan set the documents down and replied with his usual calm. Very well. What is the report? Yuen continued. Sarang has been performing exceptionally well in the colony. She has even earned the title of Golden Flash from the allied group. Allan tensed. Golden Flash. Where have I heard that name before? The memory remained just out of reach. Even so, he exhaled lightly and said, I am relieved she is safe. Yuen nodded. Indeed. In that land, strength is the only law that matters. Allan then asked, and what about Raiden? I haven't heard from him since he mentioned he was learning the trade in Rex. He said he was deployed there. Yuen adjusted the sword hanging at his waist. We have some intelligence on him, but the agents are still verifying its integrity. Allan looked at him. I see. By the way, Yuen, aren't you supposed to be busy right now? The knight froze, confusion spreading across his face like a machine that had just short-circuited. My liege, why do you gaze at me with such intensity? Have I faltered? I executed your orders to perfection. His voice trembled with unease. Allan offered a chilling smile. Prepare yourself. The journey to the magic tower demands at least a month. Yuen's eyes widened, shock seizing him. What did you say? The magic tower. I was never informed of such a destination. The realization struck him like a bolt of lightning. Allan replied with maddening casualness. Simple? Oh, did that minor detail slip my mind? How dull. Yuen exhaled a heavy sigh. I am accustomed to your whims. But a full month. Traveling to the green magic tower should only require a week. We are marching toward the blue magic tower, Allan declared. Yuen blinked rapidly. That resides near Labyrinth City. That is an absurd distance. Silence stretched between them for a heartbeat. Then, Yuen snapped to attention. I shall commence preparations immediately, my lord. Allan gave a satisfied nod. Weeks blurred into a grueling journey. Finally, Allan collapsed onto the sofa, his vitality drained like an old man's. Exhaustion crushed him, leaving his limbs heavy and useless. A month confined in a carriage. Well, the mere memory exhausts me all over again, he grumbled. Yet, fate leaves me no choice. The artifact capable of stabilizing my fragile mana circles lies there. His gaze lowered as the past surfaced. Labyrinth City. That name stirs old ghosts. In his past life within the game, he had sacrificed countless hours grinding in that hellscape. The memories flooded back in high definition. The dungeon at the city's heart was the ultimate leveling ground in Psychedelia. The deeper players ventured, the more god-tier items and rare treasures they unearthed. The majestic metropolis slowly materialized in his mind's eye. It was exactly as he remembered from his gaming days, Allan mused. Though legions of players challenged the labyrinth, none ever conquered the end. Even with cheat codes, I only scraped past the 115th floor. The developers were absolute sadists. Yet the abyss goes deeper still, and the treasure I seek waits on the 150th floor. Yuan broke the silence, summarizing the reality. Just as in the legends, relics flow from that place like water. It defies all logic. Consequently, the profession of magic appraiser has become a path to guaranteed wealth and status. Allan nodded absent-mindedly at Yuan's explanation, his spirit drifting toward Reina. Her serene eyes, her vast knowledge, her innate affinity for minerals and elixirs. She stands on the precipice of the appraiser exam, Allan noted. With her divine sense for magical artifacts, victory is all but assured. But as the room fell quiet, a shadow of doubt crept in. Allan frowned. Perhaps my gift to Reina was too meager compared to the others. He leaned back, whispering, "It merely suppresses equipment auras. If that proves insufficient, I must intervene with greater support." His focus snapped back to their destination, Labyrinth City, Labyrinthia, a lawless utopia ruled by no king, a sanctuary for explorers, machinery, and boundless ambition. Far beyond the bustling markets of the southern district, there stood a hidden gem known as the Merida Appraisal Shop. Though discreet, its legend had spread among the elite explorers for its unparalleled service. The scene shifted to the interior of Merida. A man stood frozen, his soul shaken by what he had just witnessed. A voice rang out from the shadows. "The appraisal is complete, my lord," the figure announced. The customer gasped for air. Yuan's narration overlaid the scene. Among the patrons today was a ruler of Labyrinthia. Only then did the weight of reality settle. The masked girl standing before the nobleman was Reina. She had cloaked her identity with flawless precision, and cradled within her hands and lay destiny itself. "This device fuels the flame using pure mana," she explained, demonstrating its power with quiet confidence. The lord nodded, impressed. "Thank you, as always. Let me observe." He examined the lamp with the eye of a connoisseur. An ancient relic, capable of receiving an imprint, he murmured in awe. "And the specific imprinted ability?" Reina asked, her composure absolute. "A mere sliver of mana sustains the flame for at least 1 hour." The lord smiled. "Its efficiency has skyrocketed beyond standard limits. Magnificent." He genuinely admired Reina's precision and genius. "I am honored by your patronage," she replied softly. A heavy silence descended upon the shop as the customer departed. Reina removed her mask. Her cold expression softened for a fleeting moment as her gaze drifted to another artifact on the table. She caressed it gently. "This item is also ready for imprinting," she whispered. The legend grew. Merida, the hidden appraisal shop on the city's edge. It had become infamous for its extraordinary imprinted artifacts, miracles unseen anywhere else in the realm. Deep inside the shop, a mystical object pulsed on a pedestal, waiting. "Use it well." Allan's voice echoed in Reina's memory. A gift from the great moon himself. Reina stepped into the artifact's aura. It resembled an eye, glowing with blue hellfire and swirling behind layers of sealed ancient energy. A smile played on her lips as anticipation surged through her veins. "When the great moon ordered me to become an appraiser, I questioned the purpose," she confessed to the shadows. But the memory of Allan made the path clear. His true identity, a comrade of Palin from the forgotten era of the Outer Gods. Every move he made had one goal, the total eradication of the black entities. When she first read Allan's command to enter Labyrinth City and master the art of appraisal, the puzzle pieces hadn't fit. But now, the grand design was visible. Allan required a stronghold, influence within the Labyrinth Empire, a foundation powerful enough to rival the Magic Tower itself. Yet, she had wondered aloud, how does identifying items help slaughter the black entities? But the instant her eyes locked onto the gift again, the truth struck like lightning. She entered the secret appraisal chamber, the Eye of the Stalker. It identifies items below a certain mana threshold to assist in subjugation, she whispered. Realization dawning. It was volatile, deadly. Crimson demonic chains constricted the relic, and a sinister presence leaked from its core. This was no ordinary magical wisdom. This was forbidden knowledge. Reina reached out, brushing the chains. This material, it exists in no recorded library. The relic shuddered, energy exploded outward, and the ancient seals shattered instantly. Blinding blue light flooded the room as the eye of the stalker fully awakened. Mana whipped around her like a raging hurricane. Reina leaned in, determination burning in her gaze. To gain the power to crush the black entities, I must master this artifact myself and for the great moon. Reina analyzed the awakened relic with cold precision. Dark reward. It is both an ability and a method of sacrifice. She watched the item being pierced by a golden beam of pure energy. Slowly, she engraved the imprint onto the relic she had cast into the device. I need 252 more sacrifices for full awakening. A dark chuckle escaped her lips. In exchange for boosting the relic's stats, it devours the essence of each sacrifice, evolving the eye instantly. Her tone dropped as she studied the swirling blue inferno within the machine. It only reacts to specific high-tier relics. One wrong sacrifice, and the entire stack vanishes into the void. Rhea gazed deep into the essence of the ancient relic. It hungered for a mountain of high-tier tributes to ascend to its true form, and when the seal finally broke, it would be reborn as the ultimate weapon entrusted to Allan, the Great Moon. A shiver of dark anticipation raced down her spine. She would force its awakening. With cold precision, she appraised the artifacts, selecting only the finest sacrifices for the imprinting ritual. This is a burden only I can shoulder, she whispered into the silence. She raised the relic, shaped like a divine eye. I was born with the library of eternity for this very moment. Every calculation serves one purpose, the slaughter of the black wolf. Her voice dropped to a devoted growl. All is according to the absolute will of the great moon. 3 weeks later, at the Blue Magic Tower, the supreme master of the tower was nowhere to be found. Instead, a petite girl blocked the grand entrance, her face adorable but her aura radiating pure annoyance. State your business and vanish. The tower master is absent. This was Fina, the wise tower master of the Blue Magic Tower, a six-circle archmage trapped in a child's body. She barely spared a glance at Allan, waving him off like a fly. I am swamped with work. Make it brief. Allan stood frozen, completely thrown off by her dismissive attitude. The disconnect between her tiny stature and her arrogance left him speechless. As he stared at the little mage, the memories of the original game flooded his mind. I know this girl. She is a key character from the main scenario. In this timeline, she was merely the wise tower master because the true chaos had not yet begun. But in the game lore, she was etched into history as a legend, a once-in-a-millennium genius, a prodigy who would conquer the 8th circle by the age of 20 and claim the seat of supreme leadership. Allan scanned the chaotic office. The air hummed with mana, the room overflowing with priceless magical devices and rare artifacts. The Blue Tower is a fortress, he realized. They hold a monopoly on the world's essence goods. Their political influence rivals the highest nobility. Yet, this interaction felt wrong. A being of her status should carry a different weight. She has transcended human limits, yet she acts like a brat. He straightened his back, projecting the dignity of his station. I am Count Palladio. As my missive stated, I am here to address the catastrophe of the Time Gate. The girl froze amidst her sea of documents. Parchment slid across the desk as she began a frantic, chaotic search through the stacks. Right. I need the file for that specific case. Where in the world did I put it? She muttered, tossing papers into the air. So, what was it? You claim you can neutralize the Time Gate weight. I really need that file. It has to be here somewhere. Allan maintained his icy composure and described the threat. The gate is fracturing. It bridges our reality to a chaotic subspace that manifests wherever mana density spikes. It births a monolith, a structure that unleashes devastation upon the land. Demons and calamities will pour forth from its maw. The girl's eyes suddenly glowed with mana. A detection spell swept over him, judging his worth, and she sneered at his pathetic mana capacity. And what do you plan to do with that weak mana? She scoffed, waving her hand. Forget it. Just get out. Allan's blood ran cold. This is not following the script. A knot of anxiety tightened in his chest. Without her power, the plan would fail. I require an answer, he insisted, trying to hold his ground, but Fina squeezed her eyes shut in pure irritation. You want to clear the Time Gate just to loot the treasure inside, don't you? Of course you do. Everyone is the same. She slammed her small fist onto the desk, her voice cracking with rage. Do you have any idea how many scammers march in here every single day, spinning that exact same lie? Allan felt the injustice sting him. He swallowed his frustration and declared, I speak only the truth. Guide me to the time gate, and I will prove it. Why does she refuse to believe me? Why is she being so stubborn? His thought was cut short as he watched her glare back at him, eyes burning with skepticism. The Vice Tower leader clicked her tongue in sheer irritation. Listen, I understand that you need something huge to shift the public's opinion, she said sharply. Rumors are spreading that the only reason you became the Count was because you got lucky when your siblings died. Suddenly, a violent wave of mana erupted from her. It was chaotic and oppressive, swirling through the tower like a raging storm. However, she continued undeterred. But that doesn't mean you can storm in here and cause trouble for us. She had no idea who she was provoking. She didn't realize she was speaking to the Great Moon himself. Allan froze, stunned. There is actually a rumor like that. He swallowed hard. Well, it fits the truth. But still, this woman is insane. Despite her small stature and frantic behavior, she clearly possessed terrifyingly accurate intelligence from the outside world. Allan stared at her, finally realizing just how dangerous she truly was. This Vice Tower leader? She is scary. Yuen leaned toward his ear, whispering with a face pale from tension. I'm not gonna lie, she terrified me, too. When I showed a bit of annoyance earlier, she immediately put me back in my place. He lowered his voice to a tremble, and that wasn't even her full mana. If we try anything stupid, we will drown in it. Allan sighed heavily. I am honestly depressed now. But then, something shifted within his gaze. He squared his shoulders, stepped forward, and faced the Vice Tower leader dead in the eye. If I cannot eliminate the time gate, he declared with absolute conviction, I will surrender my entire estate and property to the Magic Tower. She stared at him, still scoffing. More nonsense, I see. But then, Allan released his energy. His voice turned ice cold. If you wish, I will swear a binding oath. Not a bad deal for a moment of your time. Don't you think? For the first time, her composure cracked, and she gasped. Her eyes widened as she finally looked at Allan properly. Moments later, the two stood inside the tower's restricted zone. The time gate is right here, the Vice Tower leader announced. Remember, as promised, your entire wealth becomes mine the moment you fail. Allan stepped forward without hesitation. That will not happen. Just watch closely what I'm about to do. The Vice Tower leader observed Allan with sharp, narrowed eyes. Perfect timing, she muttered. I was wondering whether you were the true mastermind behind your county, or just an incompetent fool who got lucky. Now, I really want to see exactly what you came here to do, and just what kind of mess you are planning to create. If you fail this task, everything you own is mine. She let out a low, sinister chuckle. After observing him for a moment, she thought, I am convinced he is closer to the latter. Her gaze swept over Allan from head to toe, dissecting every detail with cold precision. Unlike that strange, inhuman atmosphere clinging to you, you only possess a tiny mana haul and barely above average sensing ability. You are stuck at the very edge of the second circle. She sneered. What exactly do you intend to do with such pathetic magic? You are completely useless. A containment box appeared before them, holding the distorted fragment of the time gate. The truth was simple. There was barely any need to forcibly close it. In 3 months, the gate would naturally collapse on its own after spitting out the remaining relics. The research team had already concluded this fact. But then, Allan spoke calmly. Not a single mage capable of closing the time gate will show up. The Vice Tower leader scoffed at his audacity. And yet, the time gate inside the Blue Magic Tower has been causing chaos for over 2 years. A thunderous crack split the air as the unstable gate pulsed violently before them. Fate itself seemed to tighten its chokehold around Allan and the Vice Tower leader. If you lack the ability to resolve this, simply leave the room, she scoffed, her tone dripping with disdain. Allan did not even spare her a glance. Her expression twisted into an ugly scowl of irritation. You intend to channel mana with your bare hands without even a staff. She let out a sharp, incredulous laugh, grinding her teeth in frustration. Even the oldest grimoires call that primitive. It is a myth, nothing more than a fairy tale. The Vice Tower leader stepped forward to intervene, her voice rising to a shriek. For heaven's sake. Hey, you arrogant brat, stop this enchantment immediately. That is lost magic. You cannot possibly control it. Get out of here before you kill us all. Yet Allan remained deaf to her cries, continuing his low chant as if she were nothing but air. Suddenly, the atmosphere shifted. A ripple distorted the very fabric of the chamber. Absolute darkness swallowed the light. A bone-chilling cold pierced through them like needles. The Vice Tower leader gasped, her breath hitching in her throat. What is this pressure? Primal terror flooded her veins as the shadows deepened. Her body betrayed her, frozen in place. I cannot move. Everything has stopped. Even time itself holds its breath. In desperation, she flared her mana, activating the Eye of Insight to pierce the veil of reality. But the moment her vision transcended the physical realm, her face crumbled in horror. Mana particles shattered in midair. Reality itself was splintering like glass, and looming behind the boy, a colossal crimson eye manifested. The eye of an ancient demon god. Violent, insane. That thing. It is madness. Suddenly, Allan's body erupted with a blood-red aura. The monstrous pupil dilated, snapping fully open to stare directly into her soul. An overwhelming killing intent crashed down on her, powerful enough to freeze her very spirit. Breath deserted her lungs. She could not look away. What kind of monster is he trying to unleash within the time gate? The Vice Tower Master stared up at Allan, her mind blank with shock and awe. Her hands shook uncontrollably as she struggled to form words. An entity beyond comprehension had manifested in his shadow. Her very core screamed in warning. It felt too simple, too terrifyingly real. She visualized the magical chains that should have bound him, whispering that such power must not exist. She tried to rationalize his theory, to find logic. But nothing made sense in the face of this absolute power. When she raised her head again, that dark demon god's eyes still lingered, watching, waiting. Her abilities were crushed instantly by its sheer pressure. She stood paralyzed. Then, a chilling voice echoed from the abyss behind Allan. An absolute command that brooked no refusal. The Vice Tower Master went deathly pale. Cold sweat drenched her face as she stammered in submission. I understand, I heed the demand. The demon god's eyes slammed shut. Time, once frozen, began to flow sluggishly again. A heavy, suffocating silence descended upon the room. The red entity faded as it sealed the time gate. Allan turned back, his voice casual. Finally, the gate is closed. His expression was tranquil, as if he hadn't just summoned a nightmare. The ancient demon god's presence vanished without a trace, leaving the mage stunned. Allan exhaled softly. That went smoother than expected. He spoke with forced confidence to cover his tracks. All I needed were the correct artifacts and the right method. Allan held up the relic. I will be taking the item Sharon crafted. I need to use this a few more times, so I cast a convincing illusion. He thought, did she fall for the bluff? But the mage girl could not stop trembling. She struggled to compose herself, her body still trembling from the overwhelming fear that had gripped her soul moments ago. I promise I won't tell a soul, she whispered. Allan frowned, his brow furrowing in confusion. Why is she looking at me like that? Did my buff spell fail to activate? He let out a weary sigh. I appreciate your concern, he said calmly, but there is no need for such distress. However, as he took a single step forward, she stumbled back in panic, nearly collapsing to the ground. I will keep silent, I swear it. I won't breathe a word of what I saw. Her voice cracked with desperation as she added, I know how to keep a secret, please. Allan stared at her, completely bewildered by her frantic behavior. Seriously, why is she suddenly acting this way? The scene shifted to the exterior of the tower. Allan walked toward Yuen and signaled his intent. Let us return now. But before he could depart, the mage girl rushed out, calling after him. Wait, just one moment, please. She extended a trembling hand, offering a small crystal vial. Please accept this. It is a high-grade mana recovery potion I brewed myself. Allan accepted the gift, his eyes narrowing as he appraised the liquid within. It was a potion personally crafted by the Blue Tower Master herself, and the quality was nothing short of top tier. Back inside the tower's entrance, the mage hesitated, her eyes darting nervously. Do you truly like it? Allan looked visibly surprised by her generosity. Just 2 bottles of this caliber would cost as much as several rare artifacts. When I checked the market price, I nearly fainted, he thought. He glanced toward the Tower Master's secure vault, a question forming in his mind. Is she really this grateful just because I managed to close the gate of time? But the mage girl shivered as she gave her reply. This is what the Count requested of me. I will absolutely remain silent about your true power. Seriously, if you wish, I will swear a mana oath right now to ensure my loyalty. Allan blinked, taken aback. A mana oath for something trivial like this. What is she even talking about? He paused, realization dawning on him. Wait, she is clearly misunderstanding the situation. Before he could clarify, the atmosphere grew heavy. The air rumbled as magical chains materialized above their heads. The Tower Master raised her staff toward the heavens and began the chant, initiating the binding mana oath right there on the promenade. She cast a fearful glance in the direction the Count had gone, and then turned back to Allan. With shaky pride, she declared, "See, I keep my word perfectly. The great moon bears witness to my pledge." Allan felt an awkward tension rising in his chest. I see. She showed absolutely no intention of clearing up the misunderstanding, and he had no polite way to stop her ritual. Thus, the Blue Magic Tower officially acquired the relic, while Allan assessed his own gains. 5 bottles of legendary potion and an unbreakable oath. For him, the reward was excessive. The journey had been more than worth it. The scene transitioned to the road. Allan stepped into Yuen's waiting carriage. Yuen examined the strange object in Allan's hand with curiosity. Lord Allan, is that the item retrieved from the gate? It was certainly difficult to obtain, yet it appears far more primitive than I anticipated. Yuen continued, does its performance truly match its fearsome reputation? Allan calmly fastened the ancient treasure to his wrist. Regardless of looks, this is something I absolutely needed for my survival. He focused his gaze on the bracelet known as the Seal of the Unholy One. I am relieved I managed to secure it. The chains embedded in the bracelet began to greedily absorb mana from the atmosphere, and the stone set within it glowed with a faint, ominous light. It is working perfectly, Allan murmured, satisfaction in his voice. Its storage capacity was not massive, but for his current condition, it was more than sufficient. His own mana reserves hollowed out instantly, and he slumped back against the seat with a quiet sigh. A body with less mana capacity than a mere support tool. Well, he reminded himself softly of his new philosophy. My goal is magical research and self-preservation. Not fighting. That is enough for me. Yuen tilted his head, unsure why his master looked so drained. Allan exhaled deeply and muttered to himself. By the way, what exactly did she misunderstand back there? His thoughts drifted to the Blue Tower Master. Her sudden shift to extreme politeness felt deeply unnatural. As he left, she had whispered, I know you are exactly like a second circle wizard. A statement that left him stunned. She is definitely mocking me, Allan assumed, though this reaction felt strangely familiar. Kalia had behaved the exact same way last time, completely shaken by his butler, yet Allan interpreted it as simple arrogance. The phantom of a memory still clung to him, refusing to fade. He forced a steady breath to calm his racing heart. It does not matter now. I have severed ties with them forever. That resolve had to be enough. Yuen nodded, sealing away the past. At least the heavens are clear today. The scene shifts to the imposing estate of Duke Alai. A heavy silence filled the room. She sat gracefully, a porcelain teacup resting in her hand. It has been far too long, she said, her voice warm yet guarded. I trust you are finding the accommodations to your liking, my lady. Jania's eyes narrowed into calculating slits before she offered Alai a razor-sharp smile. Naturally, Duke Alai. I see you remain as formidable as ever. I am simply pleased to stand in your presence. Alai countered with practiced calm. It is fortunate that we need not waste breath on titles or hierarchy between us. The unspoken truth hung heavy in the air. Jania had not come for tea. She had come to secure an alliance with Duke Alai. Count Palatonio's foresight is truly terrifying in its accuracy, Jania murmured. Her mind drifted back to the moment she received the Count's absolute command to seek out Ali. Only after obeying his guidance did the Count's true machinations reveal themselves. Upon setting foot in Duke Alai's domain, a singular realization struck them both simultaneously. Neither of them could hold a candle to Palatonio. Their partnership existed solely because he willed it so. Yet, beneath the puppet strings, a strange comfort began to form in their cooperation. In the chaotic struggle for the Great Moon, petty conflicts were rendered obsolete. All squabbles faded into nothingness before the crushing gravity of that one man's influence. Returning to the present, a lie broke the silence. The grand conference is not until next month. Why arrive today? Jania replied smoothly. The Count sent a missive the very day I arrived. He provided the perfect pretext for an early visitation. Alai's expression darkened with confusion. What could possibly warrant such haste? Jania slid the letter across the table. Alai scanned the parchment, a frown carving deep lines into his face. Complaints from the nobility regarding this matter, and a directive concerning your visit. The discussion veered toward the volatile movements of several great noble houses. The aristocracy does not suit my tastes, Alai grumbled. There must be a misinterpretation. Jania agreed. This does not read like a standard letter of apology. There is an underlying current here. Alai leaned back sharply, his instincts screaming danger. A scheme is undoubtedly concealed within the ink. Jania smiled dangerously. Precisely why we must strategize. Baron Kenya acts for the noble faction. Marcus Martonio is a pillar of the royal faction. Viscount Bland is also inextricably bound to the royalists. And you, Duke Alai, are a titan among the nobility. Alai summarized the grim reality. He does not appear to align with either side. Jania completed the terrifying thought, which means he intends to eradicate the rotting nobility entirely. A chill ran down both their spines. The realization that Allan, a man they deemed a living catastrophe, had sent this letter was horrifying. Alai raised his head, his eyes trembling with realization. This is why he required my reputation, why he elevated me to the rank of Duke. And with the hangman of the West at his side, the puzzle is complete. Jania nodded, regaining her composure. Then we must draft a counter-strategy. What kind of plan? A plan born from their utter misunderstanding of Allan, whose letter was, in truth, just a simple apology. Yet, in their paranoia, they believed he intended to wipe the noble factions from the face of the earth. Jania found opportunity in the chaos and began to weave a new web of deceit. The scene shifts to the blue magic tower. Deep within, Fina collapsed onto her desk, gasping for air. A senior mage rushed to her side. Speak to me, Fina. Why were you trembling with such fear? She looked up, her eyes wide with lingering terror. The peaceful plazas, the quiet sanctuaries, all obliterated in a heartbeat. The world was drowned in absolute chaos. She tried to voice the horror of Allan's reckless power, but fear shattered her words, leaving only the dread of Allan's name hanging in the air. There he sat, casually enjoying a roasted sweet potato under the open sky. A concerned voice asked, "Are you all right, Lord Allan?" Allan simply nodded and replied, "I nearly fainted back there, but the food is still delicious." He let out a weary exhale, his voice heavy with exhaustion. "I just want to go home." By now, Yusa's letter should be arriving any moment. Meanwhile, the Holy Kingdom bathed in the glow of a magnificent sky, where Yusa stood in the sanctuary, draped in elegant priest robes, radiant and breathtaking. Those who gazed upon her couldn't help but wonder what grand destiny awaited such a divine figure. Hers was a gift of beauty, yet it held the potential to transform into something truly terrifying. Far away, space warped around the mage tower as an elderly figure quietly materialized from the void. "Ah, my disciple, I have returned." He scanned the area, extending his senses to find a familiar magical signature, but his brows slowly furrowed in confusion. I can no longer sense the time gate. What is happening here? This man was the master of the Blue Magic Tower, the legendary 8th Circle Mage, Salem Microot. A faint, creeping sense of unease began to rise within his chest. Did something go terribly wrong during my absence? Inside the tower, the usually proud wise tower master was in a wretched state. Extreme exhaustion crushed her body, her face pale and lifeless, resembling a walking corpse more than a mage. She stood there in silence, staring blankly at the floor beneath her feet. When she finally sensed him, her eyes widened just a fraction. "Master, you're really back," she whispered weakly. "I have completed the task you entrusted to me." Salem was startled. "What did you say?" He stepped forward urgently. "What on earth happened to you?" Before he could even react, her legs gave way, and she collapsed helplessly into his arms, causing his expression to stiffen. "Is it serious? She isn't even arguing with me like she usually does." He carefully supported her weight, his gaze turning sharp and cautious. Lena had ascended to the position of Wise Tower Master at a young age. Thanks to her monstrous talent, her arrogance and razor-sharp tongue were notorious. Rumor had it she had reduced rookie mages to tears on countless occasions. She was undeniably gifted, but famously difficult to handle. I never bothered to correct her personality, Salem mused. He always believed that a genius mage would naturally realize their limits upon reaching the seventh circle. Humility was supposed to come naturally with power, but this situation was entirely abnormal. He snapped his head up, his voice demanding answers. Why didn't you contact me sooner? My journey to the north took far longer than expected. Were you overwhelmed handling everything alone? At his words, Lena suddenly lifted her head. Tears welled in her eyes as she looked at her master, letting out a long, trembling sigh. She poured out everything in the crisis with the magic gate, and the anomaly named Allan. The gate couldn't be closed. She murmured quietly. That man, he was involved. Salem's gaze sharpened instantly. You can't explain the exact reason. Can you? You are bound by a mana oath? His voice hardened with disbelief. Why would you swear an oath to a mere count? I had no choice. Lena trembled. There isn't much I can reveal in detail. She replied softly. That is all I'm allowed to explain. Salem exhaled slowly, then lightly patted her shoulder. So, that is what finally humbled you. He spoke calmly, analyzing the situation. An incomprehensible mage. Or perhaps... His eyes widened faintly as realization struck. An origin mage. Lena nodded weakly. The man named Allan possesses the ancient power of an origin mage. Salem raised his hand and gently tapped his disciple on the head. She was so broken by the encounter that she didn't even try to brush his hand away. Salem lifted his gaze toward the horizon, his voice calm but laced with intrigue. The Count Palatine of the Astria Kingdom? This just got very interesting. 1 month had passed since the expedition to the Blue Magic Tower. Allan buried himself once more in the abyss of magical theory. As he organized the chaotic pile of research, Silas broke the silence, his voice heavy with thought. Ever since I seized the mark of corruption, I have delved into the secrets of the phrases. My mana capacity has expanded, and with it, the speed of my research has accelerated. Allan's quill danced across the parchment. The key, he murmured, lies in the absolute laws governing these phrases. If the conditions are violated, the magical structure faces instant collapse. He scribbled a warning. Mismatched phrases are forbidden. To use them is to invite failure. Duplication is impossible. The limit is 4 components, no more. Any redundancy creates fatal magical interference. The quill stopped. It is not just about selection, he realized. It is about the architecture. I believe I have unlocked a new law regarding phrase usage. He stared at the formula, his voice dropping to a casual yet dangerous tone. It depends on how the magic resonates with nature's laws. Or perhaps where I choose to place those laws. I am not yet certain, but his trance was shattered. Yuen stepped in, sensing the shifting atmosphere. My lord. Yuen scanned the room, his eyes wide. What has happened here? The aura around you. It grows more terrifying every time I see you. Count. Allan exhaled slowly. Perhaps. Yuen frowned, unable to comprehend the pressure. This is no longer the magic of the second circle. It is a completely different dimension of power compared to just a few months ago. Allan gestured casually toward the devastation outside. A massive crater scarred the earth. A simple gravity spell should not have gouged the earth like this. Yuen stared into the abyss of the pit. You did this with mere gravity magic. Allan nodded silently. Even at full power, a second circle mage should not possess such destructive force. Yuen looked at him, pupils trembling. Master, this is madness. A faint, knowing smile played on Allan's lips. I felt the growth, but seeing this, perhaps it is no mere illusion. Yuen released a heavy breath. Your magic defies all logic, Count. Why do you doubt your own greatness? But Allan shook his head, remaining grounded. If the surge is this violent, it is not merely due to skill or the phrases. He analyzed coldly. Day 1, I molded the clay to shape the concept. Day 2, I refined the crafting technique. And by day 3, this destruction was the result. He gazed at the crater once more. True mastery means precision, not just brute force. I treated those 3 days as the evolutionary stages of gravity magic. Allan paused, his eyes narrowing. The phrases, they are merely the trigger. They awaken the attribute. They do not define the spell itself. His voice dropped to a whisper. I have spent months obsessing over gravity arrays, tweaking identical phrases, searching for the perfect resonance through slight alterations. Wen listened in silence, paralyzed by the sheer depth of his master's understanding. Allan stood before the research board like a general commanding a battlefield of theory. He traced the lines of the phrase array chart. Optimization usually yields gradual growth. Power should increase steadily as I fine-tune the arrangements. He looked up at Yuen, a shadow of doubt on his face. This spike, it must be an illusion. Otherwise, the logic fails. There is no formula that explains such a sudden explosion of firepower. Allan looked at his hands. Perhaps my physical condition is simply at its peak today. Yuen blinked, stunned by his master's humility. Is that so? He reached into his coat. I almost forgot. I came to deliver this. A missive had finally arrived. Allan's eyes gleamed with anticipation. My thanks, Yuen. I shall retire to my chambers to study this properly. Leaving so soon? Yuen asked, surprised. Allan offered a firm nod. Indeed. I have already exhausted my daily limit of 3 spell casts. Safe within the silence of his room, Allan opened his grimoire and carefully unfolded the letter. His gaze grew razor sharp as he devoured the words. The reason behind the sudden surge in my magical potency, he murmured. Could this power be a dark reward, a blessing born from a curse? A shadow of unease fell over his face. A curse. An ancient ritual from the East. The caster sacrifices their very soul to bring misfortune down upon another, or even upon themselves. Once the mark is placed, the victim suffers a terrible loss, yet receives a twisted benefit in exchange. Allan shook his head, dismissing the thought. But there are no practitioners from the East in my vicinity, he whispered. So, that theory is void. Returning to reality, he snapped the notebook shut and rose to his feet. Then perhaps, he murmured, pacing deeper into the room, it is the result of accumulating true faith. Allan froze mid-thought as the realization struck him. The account of a tiny, insignificant kingdom, one the underworld barely deigns to acknowledge, he muttered. He released a heavy sigh. No, that makes no sense whatsoever. After a moment of silence, he shook his head clear. Well, sometimes one must simply let the mystery be and continue to survive, Allan told himself. Surely, no calamity will come of this, all right? The holy kingdom of Rosio, the capital city, royal, it was a colossal metropolis, bathed in radiant, divine light. Pristine white spires stretched endlessly toward the heavens, forming a sacred domain. A holy landscape where the masses worshipped the goddess of the moon and peace, Sia. Inside the eastern prayer hall, Uda stood unwavering before the statue of the goddess. Her posture was dignified, her aura calm. Suddenly, footsteps echoed in the silence. Greetings, sister. Uda slowly turned her head. The knight who had arrived froze in his tracks. Her presence was breathtaking, serene, refined, yet quietly overwhelming. And to you, Sir Loki, Uda replied with a gentle grace. Have you been well? Loki narrowed his eyes. She is merely a humble nun, he thought, far lower in rank than a paladin. She does not even bear the mark of holy grace, and yet, I am compelled to show her respect. He stepped forward and bowed deeply. Yes, he responded solemnly. We successfully rescued 8 children and 25 villagers from a settlement between the eastern and western regions. It was all thanks to your guidance, sister. Uda offered a soft, enigmatic smile. Not at all, she replied. You were the sword that enacted those deeds, and you were the light that guided an ignorant soul like mine. Loki clenched his fist tightly. I shall remain eternally grateful, he vowed quietly. For 20 years, I lived in the abyss of despair. I could feel no divine power, not even a trace. I was on the brink of surrender. His vision blurred as the memories clawed their way to the surface. He saw his past self, sitting alone on the cold stone floor, broken and hollow, and then she appeared. If there is something you desire with such desperation, she had whispered softly, why not try placing your faith in the moon? Her smile back then had been faint, yet deeply unsettling. A dark design had already been taking shape within her mind. "The moon," Loki had whispered. Uda's crimson eyes gleamed with a strange light, her voice cold as ice. "You will understand in time," she said. "Once you truly walk that path." Loki's gaze hardened as he returned to his inner thoughts. "I was so desperate. I would have sold my soul, as she instructed. I prayed to the moon for days on end." Then, the transformation struck. His energy surged at an impossible pace. Divine power flooded into his blade, and instinctively, he knew exactly how to wield it. The sensation hitting him was absolute, a surge of raw, unadulterated power. For a split second, he tasted pure ecstasy, but the crash was instant and brutal. Shadows of temptation whispered in his ear, and a cold dread gripped his heart. "My devotion was to the moon, not Goddess Caronia," he hissed through gritted teeth. Terror clawed at his throat. Have I walked willingly into the abyss of heresy?" But then, a thought struck him. Power stolen from the gods was still divine, was it not? Even the sacred relics, etched with Caronia's own name, trembled in resonance. The holy charm and the bracelet upon his wrist pulsed with a faint, undeniably sacred light. A twisted smile touched Loki's lips. This light was his proof, his vindication. Snapping back to reality, he locked eyes with Uda. "Why?" he demanded. "Why did you guide me to put my faith in the moon?" Uda's smile was a mask of serenity. "Because true faith," she crooned, "blooms from believing in the unseen." "And such conviction," her grin widened imperceptibly, "takes time to ripen. It is far simpler to draw power from what already exists before your very eyes." Then, her voice dropped, sharp as a blade. "The moon will always be with you. All that you know, every truth you perceive, it all flows from that celestial body." She spoke with absolute certainty, masking the dark machinations swirling behind her gaze. The moon held a weight far heavier than Loki could fathom. An unsettling truth hung in the air. Uda swept her hand upward, claiming the heavens themselves. Loki's pupils dilated. "I understand now," he breathed. "The goddess is the moon itself. A tangible deity, allowing even the faithless to believe without a shadow of doubt." He bowed low, his posture screaming reverence. "Sister Uda, my gratitude is boundless, truly." Uda tilted her head, observing her work. "If you wish to repay me," a smile, sharp and predatory, cut across her face. "Shall we offer a prayer together?" Loki didn't hesitate for a second. "I would gladly kneel 1,000 times." She nodded, cool and collected. Perfect timing. The flock has already gathered. The prayer hall was suffocating, thick with heavy silence and solemn awe. Uda stepped forward, her heels clicking against the stone as she ascended the altar. A sea of believers bowed their heads in submission to her presence. Standing at the apex, she raised her arms to the heavens. "Now then," she proclaimed, "let us pray to the great moon." In this moment, she stood tall as Uda Blondia, sister of the Holy Kingdom of Rosario. Meanwhile, buried in the solitude of his office, Allan scanned the latest report. Just updates, routine, nothing that sparked a flicker of interest. He finished reading and let out a heavy sigh, collapsing onto his desk. Fate had been kind. Everyone was thriving. That should have been enough. But a hollow loneliness gnawed at his chest. Aside from Yusa, the mailbox remained empty. A wave of quiet despair washed over him as the reality settled in. From their perspective, it made sense. They didn't even know his face. To them, he was just a faceless benefactor in the shadows. No, perhaps just a fleeting memory. Someone who helped once, then vanished into the ether. Allan lifted his gaze, eyes narrowing. In the end, the mission was a success. He had steered them away from ruin, ensuring they wouldn't become the calamities that shattered the world. He had no right to feel wounded. Yet, in the deepest corners of his heart, the silence echoed. Nothing. No one. Another sigh escaped his lips. Yusa must have been swamped with work, and yet, she never missed a month. Perhaps his mind was playing tricks on him, yet a suffocating weight settled deep within his chest. Silence from the other children. That absence stung far sharper than he ever anticipated. His thoughts consumed him. How was Yosha faring? What trials was she facing? And was she even safe amidst the chaos? Unbidden, hot tears threatened to spill from his eyes before he could suppress them. He had poured his life into raising 5 souls. Was the eldest truly the only one to remember his devotion? Allan clenched his fist until his knuckles turned white, forcing his trembling heart to steady itself. "I am fine," he whispered to the empty room. Suddenly, a voice cut through the silence. "Count, do you have a moment?" Allan jolted, his composure shattering as he looked up. You startled me." He cleared his throat, masking his vulnerability, and cast a sharp gaze toward the entrance. "You remained here." Yuen stood like a statue, his reply smooth and unshakable. "Naturally," Yuen continued. "A missive has arrived from the Information Guild regarding the children. I deemed it urgent enough to bring to your attention without delay." Allan's gaze instantly hardened. "Speak. What is the news?" Yuen did not falter. "It concerns Raiden, the one you previously ordered me to monitor." Confusion flickered in Allan's mind, though he kept his expression an impassive mask. He had indeed commissioned the intel, yet the suddenness of the report struck a discordant chord. "What have you found?" Allan demanded, leaning in with intensity. "Report everything. Leave nothing out." Yuen bowed his head and began his briefing. "To begin, Sealrang and Deas are currently creating the greatest upheaval." His voice remained steady as he unveiled the shocking details. "Sealrang has already claimed 32 consecutive victories on the path to challenge the champion." Allan froze in his seat. 32 wins, no consecutively. A deep frown etched across his forehead. "Hold on, the record holder isn't the Lion King," Yuen interjected. 41 consecutive victories is the current peak." Allan fell into a heavy silence. Then the realization hit him like a thunderclap. The Lion King. That was the broken, overpowered character who briefly joined the player's party in the original game. "Then that arena is truly a den of monsters," Allan muttered, his voice barely a whisper. "A nation that builds its military might on blood sport." A nervous sigh escaped his lips, and Sealrang was already clawing his way to the summit of that brutal hierarchy. "This growth is unnatural. It is far too rapid." What in the world is happening there? Allan questioned the air. There had to be a catalyst. Yuen exhaled a restrained breath before delivering the next blow. "Regarding Deus and the Night Order, intelligence confirms they have annihilated one of the 8 barbarian chiefs." Allan's gaze snapped into focus, razor sharp. "Karuta of the Snowfield," Yuen declared. "The battle was absolute and decisive. Deus claimed the barbarian's life with his own hands." The image that formed in Allan's mind was chilling. Deus's evolution was no longer just impressive. It was utterly terrifying. "So you are telling me they have become monsters," Allan whispered. "Superhumans forged in blood and ritual." He exhaled slowly, the weight of the future pressing down. "I know those enemies far too well." In the game, he had clashed with those barbarians countless times. He had even stood before their dark god. The mere memory sent a throb of pain through his temples. At least that nightmare was supposed to wait until the descent of the 5 great sins. Surviving that era had been nothing short of a living hell. "I suppose I no longer need to worry about Deus' safety," Allan finally admitted. Yuen responded instantly. "Indeed, due to this feat, he is now accorded the same respect as the first sword, Reinhardt." Allan let out a long, complicated sigh. "Should I have gone to them myself?" he murmured into the silence. "Perhaps then things would not feel so distant." "I was actually planning to visit the territory personally," Yuen continued. "As for Reinhardt, who has walked the path of the appraiser, rumor has it he can now weave black imprints, dark arts that forcefully evolve the power of artifacts." As he outlined the technique, a spark of fervor danced in his voice, betraying his scholarly demeanor. "Truly fascinating, is it not?" Allan's lips curled into a faint, knowing smile. "If fortune favors us, I shall witness this miracle with my own eyes." But in an instant, the warmth vanished from his face, replaced by cold stone. "Now, speak to me of Raiden," he demanded, his voice low. "Has the boy truly fallen to the path of a pirate?" Yuen's eyes narrowed like a hawk spotting prey. "That is the gravest matter at hand." Allan frowned deeper. "You are not jesting. You know of the 7 archipelagos within the treacherous Sea of Lac?" Yuen began, the weight of the world in his tone. "The lawless zones where the pirate lords hold dominion." He took a breath, preparing to drop the bombshell. "Raiden has not merely joined them. He has risen to become the captain of the first archipelago, the mightiest of them all. What? Allan roared, the sound tearing from his throat. His strength betrayed him, and he sank back into his chair as if struck by a physical blow. Chaos erupted in his mind. Impossible. This cannot be real. For a whole year, he had poured resources into that child. His only wish was for the boy to find happiness in a peaceful, ordinary existence. And the result of his benevolence was... piracy was fate playing some cruel, twisted joke on him. Even the most chaotic outcomes of the Prince Maker simulations were never this nonsensical. A foolish internet meme he once mocked had manifested as his living nightmare. Allan buried his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking with suppressed emotion. Suddenly, he looked up, eyes burning. A pirate. His voice rasped, dry as dust. That was never the destiny I intended when I sent him to the city of Rex. UN interjected, his voice the anchor in the storm. Raiden possessed god-tier sensory perception, an innate talent for unveiling hidden threats. As a scion of the sea god race, a bloodline nearly extinct on this continent, the ocean was his birthright. The Sea of Lack is a graveyard of ancient treasures, UN continued. You steered him toward the honorable path of a treasure hunter. It was a golden future. You even bestowed upon him a specialized artifact to amplify his sensory gifts to the limit. Allan's jaw tightened until his teeth audibly ground together. And yet, he hissed, he spat on that future to become a brigand. His voice sank into a pit of despair. What an absolute disaster. Yuen paused, weighing his next words carefully before speaking. However, my liege, if he has truly conquered the first archipelago as captain, he is no mere bandit. He is effectively the king of that ocean. In the eyes of the world, he's a tycoon of immense power. But this consolidation brought Allan no comfort. I suppose that is one way to view it, he replied coldly. Yet, a vortex of questions spun within his mind. How in the world did Raiden overpower the former captain of the first archipelago? Those pirate lords were monstrous superhuman entities that transcended mortal limits. The fleets of the 7 archipelagos were renowned as invincible armadas upon the waves. A terrifying realization struck him like a thunderbolt. Did he unearth a game-breaking artifact from the ancient era? Allan remembered the countless hours he spent grinding that wretched treasure hunter minigame, purely to farm S-tier gear. Was Raiden's ascension solely due to the overwhelming might of the items I gave him? A heavy sigh escaped him, deflating his posture as the adrenaline faded. I know destiny rarely adheres to our blueprints, Allan whispered, but this taste is incredibly bitter. For a fleeting second, he looked as though his very soul had been exorcised from his body. He collapsed fully into the chair, his gaze lost in the middle distance, seeing nothing. Is this the burden of fatherhood? He murmured, the weight of his efforts crushing him. Count Yuen stepped forward immediately, alarm in his voice. My lord, are you well? Speak to me. But before Allan could utter another word, far away, at the pulsating heart of the Korkia chieftainship, lay the grand maritime metropolis Rex. A majestic island rising defiantly against the infinite horizon, a jewel of unmatched splendor. Yet, beyond its glittering shores lurked a domain that commanded both terror and worship, the 7 pirate paradises. And towering above them all, the most magnificent and formidable territory, the first archipelago. This was a sanctuary once governed by a legendary captain, one who had offered the ultimate sacrifice to receive the blessing of kingship. An era of tyranny finally crumbled with the fall. The reign of the Red Slayer, Elsidra, the tyrant of these seas, was over at last. Now, a new legend rises. The banner of the first Absurliger flies high under a new name. Raiden stands like a sentinel on the deck, his gaze piercing the endless horizon, cold and unreadable. I still cannot fathom the true nature of the Great Moon, Raiden whispers to the wind. What is its true purpose? In the beginning, apathy was his only shield. He never questioned it. To him, Allan was simply a savior, a noble who granted him a second life. Without that hand reaching out, he would have perished as a slave, discarded like biological waste in a lab. Raiden's grip tightens on the railing, his knuckles turning white. My time in the Blue Moon? It wasn't loyalty, he admits darkly. I was merely a shadow trailing behind Yusha. The sea breeze cuts through the silence. It carries his thoughts deeper into the abyss, entangled in a web of gratitude and confusion. He stands at the crossroads of a destiny he never asked for and a future he never desired. A frown mars his face. When will the command descend from the great moon? If this is truly his path, why does the destination feel so shrouded in mist? The words of the letter burn in his mind. Doubt begins to poison his resolve. Is there any honor in the life of a treasure hunter? He feels no spark of ambition, only a cold, gnawing repulsion. There are too many sinners who still need to pay in blood. Darkness swallows his gaze as the nightmare resurfaces. On that forgotten island, his tribe knew only peace. Until the reapers in black robes descended from the sky, there was no negotiation, only slaughter. The symphony of screams and the scent of iron, it haunts his every waking moment. Even after escaping to the continent, the hunt did not end. The predators tracked them down. Helpless, he watched the light fade from his parents' eyes. Those wretched devils. After the carnage, he was sold like livestock. Raiden clenches his fist. Becoming a hunter, receiving this power, none of it matters. It won't quench his thirst for vengeance, and it won't bring the dead back to life. He glares toward the direction of his lost home. For now, I will play the obedient soldier. A sudden raucous noise shatters his concentration. What is that disturbance? He shifts his stance. The pirates are feasting, their laughter echoing like the cackle of hyenas. One scoundrel leans back, lighting a cigar, his voice dripping with arrogant excitement. Listen well. Only the chosen few receive the heavenly king's blessing through the ultimate sacrifice. Every captain of the 7 Absurliger who survives ascends to eternity. Raiden freezes. His aura instantly changes, turning sharp enough to cut glass. Pure killing intent floods his vision. The 7 pirates? The very ones who butchered my family. His expression descends into the deepest shadow. So, they actually captured a king. He thinks, his mind racing, and they dare call it a blessing. That isn't a miracle, it is an abomination. It is blasphemy that power belongs solely to the sea god, Clyde. It requires a forbidden ritual, one forged from the flesh and blood of the sea god's race. That divine power was never meant for these filth. It belongs to my people, to my bloodline, and the Absurliger captains are feasting on it. Raiden's breath comes in ragged gasps as an uncontrollable rage detonates within him. Those hunters. They tore my parents apart for this power. Veins bulge on his hand as he prepares to unleash hell. I will obliterate them, Raiden vowed in the silence of his soul. Every single wretched pirate. A cold, suffocating darkness surged through his very veins. Bathed in midnight moonlight, Raiden stood atop the precipice, gazing down at the distant revelry of his sworn enemies. His eyes held a heavy, abyssal gloom. How did they uncover the truth? Raiden muttered, his voice barely a whisper. I never breathed a word of my past to a soul. A chilling realization struck his heart like ice. It felt as though the great moon itself had orchestrated this moment. A perfect stage for vengeance, arranged to honor an ancient pact. His predator's gaze remained locked on the vessel below. Watching the vermin celebrate, Raiden's fist clenched until his knuckles turned white, rage boiling like magma beneath his skin. But the time for slaughter is not yet now, he whispered, his voice dangerously low. Those monsters wield the sea god's power. They are superhumans. His eyes narrowed into slits. As resolve hardened his mind, he looked to the pendant resting against his chest. Suddenly, it erupted with a sharp, blinding glow. If this stage was truly set by design, Raiden murmured, then there is a reason the great moon bestowed this gift upon me. He bowed his head, his gaze fixed on the artifact with absolute reverence. Pure admiration washed over him as he offered his silent worship to the celestial power. This power shall be the cornerstone of my vengeance, he declared. The atmosphere shifted heavily. Without a shred of hesitation, Raiden launched himself from the cliff's edge, plunging into the abyss of the sea below. A piercing light flashed across his vision as the pendant awakened. The great moon's divine gift. The Amrita goggles. Raiden noted with calm precision. With these, locating artifacts concealed in the ocean's depths is child's play. His sight pierced the murky darkness. The treasures I salvaged are more than enough to bridge the gap in my strength. The moment Raiden locked onto the prize, a treasury box, shimmering with faint light, he cracked it open. Inside lay a magnificent golden bracelet. He retrieved the artifact and securely fastened it around his ankle. To think I merely offered a simple word of thanks, Raiden whispered. How utterly foolish of me. The seascape was hauntingly beautiful. Raiden lifted his gaze to the moon, its silver light dancing across the waves. "The great moon has honored its vow," he proclaimed. "Not only did you deliver my prey directly before my eyes, but you even restored the power to execute them, the power that is the birthright of my tribe." A glint of profound understanding sparked in his eyes. "I finally grasped the true meaning of the command within your letter." A faint, knowing smile curved his lips. "Your grand design was never limited to mere vengeance," Raiden mused. "It was to position me to seize control of the 7 predators." He lifted his chin in defiance. Bathed in lunar radiance, his posture radiated absolute confidence and a striking, regal presence. "My instincts were correct," he said calmly. "I will not forget a single detail." His thoughts drifted to her. "That woman is a true genius," Raiden muttered, "and utterly terrifying." He exhaled a soft breath. "That day marked the true beginning," he said. "What once felt like a curse has transformed into a wellspring of trust." He sighed, his voice deep with emotion. "Every moment has been carved deeply into my heart, and..." Raiden's eyes sharpened like daggers as he swore a silent oath to the great moon. He turned, losing himself in the vast, shimmering sea beneath the moonlight. Then Raiden looked up. 3 months later, the oppressive heat had finally surrendered to the crisp embrace of autumn. It was the golden season in Benel, Estria, the season of the grand social gathering. Inside a rattling carriage, Allan sat rigid as stone, tension etched into every line of his face. "I was dragged into this against my will," he spat, his displeasure palpable. "The mandatory gathering held once every 4 years. I truly loathe this absurd charade." His expression darkened as the shadow of the approaching banquet loomed over him. The carriage tore swiftly down the road. "My lord," UN reported from outside, "the carriages from House Cardellade and House Adron have joined our formation as scheduled." "Very well," Allan responded, his voice flat. Within the carriage, he understood the logic. Moving in a grand convoy significantly lowered the threat of bandit ambushes. Yet, the irritation clawed at him. What a bizarre and infuriating tradition this was. Allan let out a heavy, weary sigh. Only now did he realize just how tightly strung his nerves had been all evening. Upon reaching the grand hall, 2 figures were already conspiring nearby. "Honestly, Count, surely a single guard is excessive for someone of your..." "Standing," one sneered. The other replied, his tone dripping with mockery. "Ever since you stumbled into that title by sheer accident, your treasury must be bleeding dry." The toxic atmosphere pressed down on Allan, suffocating him. "For me, the threat isn't the bandits lurking in the forest," he thought coldly. "It is that accursed bastard, Brad Nobles." The 2 men hovered like vultures, their demeanor oily and repulsive, flashing excessive smiles in a desperate bid to curry favor. One of them ran his tongue over his lips in a grotesque, exaggerated display. A wave of revulsion washed over Allan. He bowed his head over his plate to mask the cold fury in his eyes, muttering with barely suppressed irritation. "These vipers spit poison into my face, only to slither away and stab me in the back the moment I turn around." It was to be expected. The Palatinino name had long been synonymous with infamy, a villainous faction that once held the western and eastern underworlds in an iron grip. Their empire was built on mountains of gold, every coin dredged from the deepest, darkest abyss. "But I am content with this life," Allan reassured himself calmly. "I have washed the blood from my hands." He had no trouble maintaining this peaceful existence now. Besides, he reasoned internally, that dark world is far too treacherous to revisit. Yet, there are always wolves that refuse to stop howling. Because of his absence, the eastern underworld had become a feasting ground for bottom feeders. Nobles and self-proclaimed predators stood at the vanguard, stirring up a storm of chaos. And then there is that rumor, Allan thought, his annoyance spiking, that I only ascended to the rank of Count through sheer dumb luck. As expected, it was the perfect fuel for the jealousy burning within the nobility. He knew all too well that the whispers of him being the kingdom's shadow mastermind had long since faded. They had been replaced by the pathetic tale of a man who simply got lucky. At that moment, one of the nobles exclaimed with theatrical pity, "Oh, dear Count, how tragic that your coffers are so empty." The other chimed in, a plastic smile plastered on his face. "You know, I could extend a helping hand whenever you beg for it." Allan's patience snapped like a brittle twig. Aren't you two a bit too old to be acting this pathetic? He stated coldly. I did not expect you to spew your mockery directly to my face. His gaze sharpened like a blade. These fools are crossing the line, he thought. I see now. Allan's inner voice turned icy. It is time for the Palatinino Victims Association to convene. The Cardellade and Adron families, once crushed under the heel of the Palatinino, were now unleashing years of bottled-up resentment. Allan looked down at the two men with freezing indifference. They are using me as an emotional outlet, he realized, suppressing the urge to strike, trying to regain some semblance of control in their own twisted reality. The sight of their smug, self-satisfied faces made his stomach churn with disgust. What a pack of filthy mongrels. Allan cursed in the silence of his mind. It wasn't my hand that cast the first stone, Allan scoffed, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips. Honestly, dealing with them feels like shooing away barking street dogs. Yuan blinked at the two nobles in surprise, then bowed his head in agreement. Insolent curs, the lot of them. Your wisdom is absolute, my lord. I have to give you credit. Allan turned a blind eye to the provocations. Silence is the only answer they deserve, he stated coolly. Indifference cuts deeper than any blade. He then shifted his gaze to his subordinate. Where did you disappear to? Fresh from the kitchens, my lord, Yuan replied, presenting a steaming platter. You simply must taste this. The roasted prawns are divine. Allan inspected the offering, his brow arching with interest. They look exquisite, he murmured, a feast for the eyes. The two of them began to dine amidst the chaos. Nothing beats the taste of earth-grown roots, Allan remarked. Perfect for a bone-chilling night like this. But before Yuan could respond, the nobles' sneering voices cut in. I heard your shadow army crumbled because their commander was incompetent. One noble spat with disdain. Another laughed mockingly. It seems you can't even maintain a carriage, let alone a territory. Yet, Allan remained unmoved, like a mountain facing the wind. He meticulously peeled another prawn, his focus absolute. Listening to their drivel, he said casually, Do you hear that? The buzzing of mosquitoes is particularly loud tonight. The nobles flushed red with humiliation. Allan simply enjoyed another bite. Still delicious, he commented. Yuan nodded solemnly. A touch of butter would elevate it further. We shall request it next time, my lord. Their banter flowed, drowning out the insults, until the scene dissolved into darkness. Far to the north, the frozen land stretched into infinity, a white hell swallowed by biting wind. The atmosphere was stripped of life, a void where warmth went to die. Warriors of the wilderness lay broken on the ice, statues of death frozen in time. Amidst the carnage, one spark of life refused to be extinguished. His eyes burned with a mixture of agony and unquenchable fury. As he hissed through gritted teeth, those treacherous Caliban curs, honor means nothing to them. He was a titan among men, one of the 8 great Culkins, a chief who lived for the Song of Steel. He recalled Samus's promise. They were owed a sacred duel, a clash of legends. But instead of glory, they found only butchery. To a Culkin, the battlefield was a temple, and combat was their prayer. Yet this defeat, it was a massacre born of deceit and cowardice. This is no war, he rasped. There is no honor here. Crimson coughed from his lungs, staining the snow as he remembered the betrayal. The memory of the blade in his back burned hotter than the cold, luring him into a rat's trap under the guise of a knight's duel. The Kulkan chief convulsed violently, his strength failing as he slumped against the permafrost. What became of Garuna of the snowfield? He choked out painfully. His fading vision drifted to a corpse lying stark and still nearby. Gall rose in his throat. Garuna, forgive me, to meet an end so devoid of glory, the chief whispered. I cannot even embrace death with pride. Suddenly, the shadows deepened, devouring what little light remained in the world. A voice from the abyss sliced through the frozen land. Speak my name. The barbarian warrior wept tears of blood, yet the eldritch command was relentless. Summon me, it demanded. Invoke the great name, the one you hold above all others. The chief's life force flickered like a candle in a storm. With his final breath, he exhaled the name of the entity that ruled this frozen hell. Altaz. In that fleeting moment, a violent spasm racked his frame. The barbarian chieftain smashed his palm into the permafrost, forcing his broken body to rise through sheer, indomitable will. Great God, Altaz! He gasped for air. With trembling reverence, He lifted his gaze to the heavens. We dare to invoke your glorious name, my liege. Suddenly, the very atmosphere began to warp and distort. A silhouette slowly materialized from the void, a presence both mysterious and utterly terrifying. Cascades of white hair flowed behind him, and his skin shimmered with a cosmic blue hue, ethereal as a high elf. Yet his visage bore a demonic sharpness, and his eyes glowed with an insatiable, bottomless hunger. The entity snapped his fingers with a crisp, commanding sound. "Granted," he spoke with bone-chilling coldness. "Do it!" His piercing gaze bored straight through the barbarian chieftain, sealing his fate.